Good evening and welcome to the Muscatine Community School District Board of Education Monday, December 9th meeting. Madam Secretary, would you take roll and help us determine a quorum, please?
You bet. Director Cooney?
Yes.
Director DeBeat?
Present.
Draba?
Here.
Finn?
Here.
McCarter?
Here.
Morgan?
Here.
Sure.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. A new alphabetical order makes a difference, right? Thank you. If you would all stand and join me in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome all of our visitors and any media representatives that we have with us. We appreciate you joining us, especially on such a cold evening. Our next agenda item is our Student Council update. If you will step to that podium, that would be perfect. Our listeners at home can hear you much better when you speak into that.
Hello, I'm Gabriel Salazar, and I am the freshman class president.
Hi, I'm Isabel Zigamet, and we're from the Muscatine High School Student Council program. We would like to share with you today that this week our Hunger Drive committees sold cookies to raise money for MCSA. This weekend was our Muscatine annual holiday stroll, and at that we raised $200 to share to MCSA, and Student Council will be donating $1,250 to MCSA for all Hunger Drive activities.
This week is Happiness Week at Muscatine High School, and we have many fun events planned for the school this week to help keep spirits high and stresses low. Before Finals Week, Student Council has decorated and personalized a third of teachers' doors in the building. We are handing out cookies, popcorn, and hot chocolates during lunch periods. And we are also hosting different yoga sessions during Muskie time and a snowflake-making craft stations. Along with all of this, we have theme days for this week. As always, we will host our annual Bring Your Dog to School Day for the staff on Friday.
Finally, we are approaching Senior Survivor season at MHS. Senior Survivor is a competition that senior teams, a girl and a boy, will raise money for local and national charities.
The actual week of Senior Survivor is not until March, but Senior Survivor sign-up packets are ready out. We already have several senior teams interested in competing in the competition this year. Packets are due December 20th, and teams will find out if they're eligible to compete in the fundraising part of the competition mid-January.
Our goal this year is to raise over $10,000 for local and national charities by the end of the competition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you sneak away, does anyone have any questions for our Student Council representatives? Each time you're here, I'm always amazed at the efforts of what you're doing and your fundraising. So thank you so much for what you're doing and the efforts in giving back to our community. $10,000 is a huge goal. We'll be anxious to hear. I bet you blow it away. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is our Citizen Speaks portion of our agenda. This is the opportunity if anyone in the audience would like to speak to the board, you're able to do that. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. Please state your name and address. And as I shared with our Student Council representatives, it's really important that you step up to the podium and use the mic. I know it feels sometimes a little loud, but if you're watching at home, you can't hear the conversation otherwise. And just as a reminder, by policy, the board is not able to engage in conversation. We're happy to listen, but we're not able to engage at this time. So if anyone would like to approach the podium, feel free to do so now.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Natalie Maxwell McDonald. I live at 111 Cannon Avenue, and I'm a parent of a 6th grade student at Madison. I'd like to start off by thanking all of the administrators and school board members who have met with us in the past few weeks. We appreciate your time and just being there to discuss our concerns. Board members, we especially appreciate you as our elected officials and look for you to continue to represent the best interests of our children. We also thank you for sending out the many charts and data points surrounding enrollments and class size. It's clear from those numbers that our district is facing declining enrollment, and while I appreciate the need to be proactive in managing its effect on our budget and buildings, based on the current situation, I'm just wondering if maybe we've jumped the gun a little on some of the closures and mergers. For instance, the K through 12 history and projections chart that you sent out shows a projected decrease of 120 kids between now and the end of the 2021-2022 school year, which is only about 9 students per grade. So me, from the outside looking in, that seems like not a ton of kids for the amount of buildings that have been closed and might be merged. As far as class size, in many cases, the averages you've presented, I realize they are averages, but they don't really reflect the actual high numbers that we're seeing in some of our children's classrooms. In my opinion, 30 or 35 students in a classroom, especially at the elementary level, is too many, even if they do have multiple teachers. That's a lot of distractions and noise and just bodies in a room. And while the proposed layout for West and the number of classrooms may fit the number of classes taking place, it may look good on paper, our current situation just shows that what looks good on paper doesn't always translate to success in real life. And I know there's growing pains and that you have to learn and adjust as you go, but that's just something to think about. We're now halfway through the school year and still haven't seen solutions implemented for the overcrowding at our elementary schools, especially Madison and Grant. It just seems like the issues and reaction times would only be larger and take longer if we force our students and staff into a middle school that's too small for them. And I just would really hate, especially as the parent of a 6th grader, to see him go through 3 years in a row of those challenges, especially during his teenage years, which are a rough time to begin with. With all this in mind, I ask you to strongly consider keeping Central open until we've had a chance to fix and learn from the issues we're dealing with this year, and most importantly, until the incoming student body is truly right-sized to fit comfortably and safely into West Susan Clark. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Is there anyone else?
Hello, my name is Carrie Zorch, and I live at 23 Colony Drive. I am the parent of an 8th grader at Central, a 6th grader at Grant, and a 4th grader at Grant. And let me start out by saying I believe the staff at my kids' schools are doing the best they can with the situation they've been given. I've been an active PTO member in the past, as well as volunteer on about a weekly basis in the classrooms, and I always find the teachers dedicated to their students. This is one of the many reasons why I was in support of moving 6th grade back to the elementary school. I'm also a former middle school counselor, so I know how the middle school years can be some of the most difficult for a student. So keeping them in the more nurturing environment of elementary seems ideal. However, what I've observed as a parent this year has been anything but. It really comes down to a space issue, however. There are just too many kids in one school. Here's what I'm seeing. Overcrowded classrooms with teachers having to team teach large groups of kids in classes of a regular size, or have their classrooms meet in the library. Isn't having smaller class sizes one of the most important factors in school improvement and student achievement? Number 2, pickup after school is overcrowded and feels very unsafe. Number three, lunchroom is overcrowded. Number 4, in the new second parking lot at Grant, there's nowhere to even park when volunteering or to pick up a sick child. And number 5, students no longer get to leave their classrooms for art, music, etc. I understand our enrollment is dropping like almost every other district in Iowa, but the projected number to drop between this year and next year is 67 kids. That's across kindergarten through 12th grade, and it's hardly enough to warrant shutting down another school, especially a middle school that's currently servicing almost 400 students. Can we maybe put the brakes on a bit and work some kinks out before these students get slighted another year? Should their education suffer this much because we're getting ready for the numbers to drop, eventually down the road. Disciplinary issues are already frequent in a middle school setting, so let's think about how that might look with overcrowded classrooms, hallways where students are expected to walk one way, lunchroom, courtyard, and locker rooms. And by the 7th and 8th grade, students are adult size, not little kids. They say Central would need so many repairs, but I sat at a basketball tournament all day Saturday in the Central Middle School gym because the West gym is in need of repairs and couldn't be used. And wasn't it just West that had to shut down for a day about a month ago? I don't see why we can't keep Central open until numbers are really down. We should be serving our current population with the best possible education. We are just asking to hold off for a bit and learn from this year before prematurely closing another school. Our teachers and students deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
Hi, my name is Molly Boyer. My address is 2507 Mulberry. I'm the mother of 4 kids in the district. I've got 3 in 7th grade at Central and 1 in 6th grade at Madison. I'd first also like to thank the board members for meeting with us, administration for meeting with us over the past few weeks since the last board meeting. We appreciate you listening to us and taking the time out of your days to really listen and participate in conversation. The petition that was presented last month was kind of the first step that we could take as parents to get a pulse on what are the feelings of the majority of the people in the town. We didn't know if we would have 25 people that would sign it, if we'd have 500 people that would sign it. Turns out about 1,200 signed it, and several of your comments had to do with, yeah, but there were a bunch that weren't from Muscatine. Some of those I'd like to address. Jennifer Edwards and I served on the Madison PTO for several years. She's currently listed on the petition as living in Deerfield, Illinois. I can confirm she still lives in town. Her children still attend school here. Heidi Cochran is another one who is on the petition that lives in Roscoe, Illinois. She also lives in town, and she is currently playing an active role member at the Madison PTO. Last but not least, Becky Reese does not live in Grinnell. She and her husband have lived in the same house for the past 16 years here in town. So some of those things are just to point out that there are some glitches in the system, but to discredit the mass number of names that have been presented would be disappointing from elected officials, because that is our current only tool other than coming and standing in front of you and talking at these meetings. We kind of just feel that I personally feel the ramifications of moving 6th grade to the grade schools has proven just to show the inadequacy of our first facilities. You've taken away art rooms, music rooms, cafeterias, and libraries of our youngest students. Those are the fun things in school. The use of portable units should be a sign of a growing district, not one that is shrinking and a result of poor facility management. We've got a 1st grader at Madison who's convinced her day is longer every day than it was when she was at Colorado in kindergarten, because she doesn't leave the building, or she doesn't leave her classroom other than to get lunch and recess. Those parents consider themselves lucky because their kid gets to go to the cafeteria for lunch, where the 4th grade parents are feeling unlucky because their kid goes and gets their lunch and then goes and eats in their classroom. A lot of those consequences were not presented to the parents before they happened. If parents had had that knowledge of all of these different events that have happened, you would have heard our voices a long time ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Is there anyone else?
Hello, my name is Jill Holler, and I live at 1314 Oakland Drive. I have 2 kids in the district. There have been consequences of closing several elementary schools in a short period of time in our school district. The students are not being served well, nor are the teachers and staff. Our buildings are overcrowded, and class sizes are much larger than they should be. Regardless of what the class size averages say, on the school website. Class size averages mean nothing when they don't match up with the actual numbers of students in the classroom. I have talked to the parent from Grant whose child has 35 in his class, and a parent from Madison whose child has 38 in her class. My own daughter has 29 in her class at Mulberry and 31 when she goes to math. These do not add up to the averages being put out there. And honestly, parents feel like they're being manipulated because they know exactly how many students are in their kids' classrooms. At one point, I asked for the exact number of students in my daughter's classroom, and the number I received was wrong. You can make numbers look good on a page, but when reality says something different, reality wins. Some people say class size doesn't matter, but if you ask any teacher, they'll tell you differently. I have expressed my concern about large class size over the years, but class sizes have gotten bigger. One response I received was, "That's just the way it is." I'm sorry, but that's not a good answer. I feel we are going backward as a school district. Administrators keep saying that our enrollment is dropping, but you couldn't tell that by looking at our elementaries, which are busting at the seams. We don't have enough space for students, and now the district is talking about bringing in portable trailers for classrooms. It doesn't make sense to close actual buildings only to bring in trailers and start paying rent on those. Trailers are typically used temporarily when districts are expanding in population, not shrinking. So what is going on? There seems to be little prior planning, and now the district is trying to patch something together. Was it really wise to close down Colorado School at the same time the 6th grade was merged into the elementary level? Was the problem of overcrowding even addressed? Most parents don't believe good things are going to happen if Central closes at this current time, with only West remaining for our middle school students. Our experience this year leads us not to trust that. The facilities at West lack in so many ways. Hallways that aren't large enough, inadequate sports facilities such as no track, no football field, not enough gym space, inadequate locker room space, practices for sports that will have to be early in the morning instead of after school, and definitely not enough parking. I'm sure there are already some average numbers being created to make me feel better, but I won't be convinced by those. We already see that the averages haven't added up this year. Person after person I have talked to is fed up, frustrated, and disillusioned with the overall direction of our district, and most of all, people are frustrated that no one is listening. There are 1,200 people who have signed this petition, and I'm wondering, is anyone listening? I'm asking you, the school board, and you, the administration, do you care about the voice of the people? Will you listen, or will you go ahead with your plans? Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Anyone else? All right, the next item on our agenda. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's all right. I looked down and I should have looked up one last time.
It's okay. Hi, Josh Boyer, 2507 Mulberry Avenue as well. I'm here as your guest speaker tonight. I had a very concerned mother that was unable to make it tonight, so she asked me to read a letter for her. I have a letter from Mirna Mareska. I have 3 children in the Muscatine School District. 9 years ago, when my husband and I decided to move to Muscatine, one of our considerations was a school system. At the time, Muscatine had a better school system where elementary schools consisted of small numbers where the teachers had the opportunity to identify students who needed more attention or those who were more advanced. In recent years, I've seen how much the system has changed and how it has affected my child's education. You seem to have forgotten the most important thing in the future, our children and our society. And it is to educate our children with a solid system to create future leaders and people of benefit to our society. In recent years, we have only thought of how much money we can save and have forgotten how much negative effects have arisen with these decisions. Primary school is the cornerstone of our future. How can a teacher identify who needs more help than others when they have a classroom full of students? In Madison, they currently use the library as a classroom. Since the planning was wrong, Madison did not have the capacity to receive the population from another school. It had to be improvised. Small rooms that were used for extra or complementary classes are now classrooms. Teachers are sharing classrooms because no more classrooms are available. Teachers need recognition for their efforts to continue educating our children in these circumstances. The gym in the morning, when students wait to go to their classrooms, is dangerous in the case of emergency. But we didn't think about that when we decided to keep closing schools. Parents have to park 2 blocks from the school so they can pick up their children on time. If these things happen in elementary school, imagine what will happen when Central closes. West isn't ready to receive these students. Thank you for your attention. Mariner Maresca. Thank you. Josh Boyer.
Thank you, Josh. And I'm sorry I almost cut you off before you even got started. Anyone else? Okay. Next item then on our agenda falls under our board targets and goals and is part of our superintendent update. We start under students will graduate prepared for post-secondary options.
Rachel Hansen has a report for us regarding World Culture's National Geographic grant update, and I'm going to embarrass her just a little bit. She is an outstanding teacher, and we are really lucky to have her in our system.
Okay, that was short. That was good. You made me nervous.
I tried to read it just like you wrote it, Rachel. So.
Yeah, I don't think I wrote any of that, actually. Like Dr. Reeby said, I'm Rachel Hansen. I have the great privilege of representing our social studies department at the high school today, where I serve as our department chair. If you're unfamiliar with the path that students take into social studies, they're really presented with one of two options moving into their freshman year. Either they take AP Human Geography, and we recommend that if they're reading and writing at grade level. And then our other course is World Cultures, where we see that as an awesome opportunity to embed literacy skills that might be lacking in engaging ways. And a summer and a half ago, it's been now, I stumbled upon a grant from National Geographic through our Geography Alliance of Iowa, which I serve on their steering committee. And this grant opportunities have come and gone. I've never written a grant, and I thought, well, yeah, sure, we can give this a shot. It seems really interesting. We have kind of a good idea here. And unwillingly, I brought in our entire World Cultures team, which I affectionately like to call the Dream Team. So I might be standing up here and speaking, but I'm speaking on behalf of really a dream team of educators who touch the lives of 250 students at our high school daily. That includes Alex Osbaker, Jason Stolzfus, Kennedy Heimerdinger, and Kyle Kennedy. Those last two are two young educators who, as first-year teachers, got to be part of what was at times a chaotic and exciting grant experience. So National Geographic put out a request for proposals for an Out of Eden Walk grant. And Out of Eden is a photojournalism experience that's created by Paul Salopek. He's been retracing human migration out of Africa since 2013. He's walking. He's walking from Africa through Asia. Eventually he'll cross the Bering Strait. He's going to make it through the Americas to the tip of South America. He's currently in India. He's a little behind schedule. But he's walking and he's experiencing slow journalism, which he thinks builds empathy and understanding about people in the world who often get misrepresented in the media. And so our grant was to help students do that same kind of slow journalism work, except through podcasting. I don't know if you listen to podcasts or not. I'm a big podcast fan, but had never made a podcast. And I thought it'd be a great experience for our students to learn literacy in an engaging form. So we purchased 30 podcasting kits. There's one up here. I'll show you what's in my bag of magic tricks here. So we've got, through our grant, we got to purchase this fancy stuff. A bunch of equipment, a microphone, which is safely in here, and a sound, kind of like a soundboard that they can speak into. And essentially what students were doing was learning how to construct historical narratives on their own, but they did it in an engaging way with students from around the world. So if you could have been in our classroom January through May last year, you would have heard the life of our classroom change, both audibly and visually. So students connected in an online learning platform through Out of Eden with students from around the world. They had an opportunity to check in weekly with their pen pals from Singapore, from Spain, from New Mexico, from Rhode Island. There were students all over the world. And with those students, we were engaged in learning about human migration patterns and human history. And so throughout the year, they continued to connect with their partners and learn from them, and in the end, produce a podcast. So what I'm here to share with you today is the real impact that had on our students. We measured a lot of their literacy growth throughout the year, and we know from 5 years of offering World Cultures that our students make incremental gains. And actually the students who are farthest behind make the largest gains, which is really, really exciting and rewarding. We know that project-based learning can be empowering, especially in accessing literacy for students who struggle in that category. But we also asked students to self-report on what they felt like they had learned. And of course, in all of the ways that we thought they would grow, students self-reported that they were self-motivated to participate. They thought we had more interesting projects and assignments. Making a podcast is inherently interesting. But they also collaborated more with peers who were not like them, who may have been a different religion, race, ethnicity, or who held different political views. And I kind of thought that would be at the forefront of what they would self-report as being their largest areas of growth. And I was shocked to learn that there are 3 areas of highest growth were the areas that I thought would probably be lowest in their rankings. So first, and this was ranking in 3rd, their ability to examine their own strengths and weaknesses of their own views on a topic or issue increased from 54% earlier had said that they could reflect on their strengths and weaknesses, and a growth up to 72%. So 3/4 of our kids felt like they were engaging in some kind of metacognition about their learning. They also self-reported that they had learned to work effectively with others, but the largest gain that they had self-reported, and this was them, they felt like they became better writers. And that was kind of secretly our goal. We never expressed that to them. We wouldn't want to let them in on that secret. Because if we told them we were here to do a bunch of writing, I think we would have lost their interest quickly. And so immediately when I saw this data, we made such a huge shift, 22%, to the point that, there was only 6% of students who reported that they felt like they didn't gain anything in literacy, in writing. So I went back and looked at the data yesterday. We were able to pull everything. And our goal is that 70% of students would make growth in at least one area of the 4 metrics that we analyze in their writing throughout the year. We take a baseline, a midpoint, and an end of the year check. And we blew it out of the water. And they were absolutely right to say that they gained literacy. This podcast has been life-changing for our students. You can listen to them online if you'd like. The website is thehumanstory.com. And that's with dashes. So the-human-story.com. They had to report on a human experience on the planet from their perspective in Muscatine here, but they had to incorporate a global perspective. And they had plenty of opportunities, thanks to this grant, to engage in that kind of really authentic intellectual work that was challenging to them. So we've had a blast, and now we're excited to have the equipment that we can continue to build projects like this for more students. Thank you.
Rachel, thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
Sounds like we have some podcast work to go do. We do, the board does. The next item on our agenda, falling under our second target of Muscatine schools will utilize resources effectively and equitably, is an update on our middle school mergers.
Yeah, we have a number of people to report out on where that is at and to give the board some information. And we do have a lot of information, and obviously there's folks that have a lot of interest in how this is going and what this would look like. So we'll get started. Mike, I believe you're going to start with some enrollment trends.
Yes, thanks, Jerry. I first would have probably introduced the other people that will be part of the presentation. If you just raise your hand, Chris Nienhaus, middle school principal at West, Corey Spees, middle school principal at Central, Liz Nagus, middle school teacher, Denise Colvin, assistant principal at both schools, and then also Terry Hoganson will be joining us this evening as well. And then we'll follow it up with Stephanie, the Madison principal. Zelig will talk a little bit about how we're going to use portables, a proposal to look at portables. What we're going to kind of go over tonight with the board, and please ask questions as we go along. We're going to give an overview of pre-K through 12 enrollment trends, focus a lot on middle school and the middle school plan for transition and so forth. But within that, I think you'll get a comprehensive overview of what our enrollment trends are. So we'll kind of go with the first slide. The first slide shows just our history of enrollment. And you can kind of see on that chart that from 2013, so for the past 6 years, we've been experiencing pretty significant declining enrollment to the point of 579 students. So if you're wondering what that equates to as far as state funding, that means a decrease of $3.8 million in state funding over that period of time. When you see such a significant decline in enrollment, you usually, your options are the following usually. You either can reduce staff, programs, or facilities. I would, and I sincerely mean this, under Jerry's and Tom's budgetary leadership and also with the board's focus on what is best for students, our districts avoided cutting any programs or reducing any staff during a time of a noticeably large enrollment reduction. The next slide shows kind of the elementary trend. It's been talked a lot about, when you look at this trend, you can see that in our K through 5 over that period of time, that we've experienced 477 students reduction. That's obviously the large part of where we're seeing the reduction. You would kind of expect that because our student population is declining because we have larger or smaller class sizes coming in kindergarten, and it equates to you have large class sizes graduating, and then you have smaller coming in. So that's where the reduction's at. So when you look at these numbers, you have to break it out by elementary and secondary. Right now, the huge reduction is at the elementary level, but that's going to transcend into the secondary level. Obviously, in a few years, you'll start seeing that. The next chart shows, I think people have a tendency to equate when you have declining enrollment, they equate it to, that must mean more people are open rolling out. And I think this chart does a nice job of explaining and showing that our decline in enrollment is not due to students or parents deciding to open enroll out. It's really due to our community's declining birth rate. When you look at this chart, you can see you have what you have at that last column. You have percentages of reductions as far as due to open enrollment out. And you can see for Muscatine, we're at 4.24. When you take that and compare it to the state average of 7.47, we're significantly lower than most school districts are as far as the amount of students and parents asking for open enrollment. If we would be at the state average this year, we had 150 students open enroll out. If we were to be at the state average of 7.47, that would probably be about 360 students. So you can see it's a lot less than that. The thing that was brought up earlier too that I totally agree with is that roughly 80% of our school districts in Iowa are experiencing the same thing, declining enrollment due to lower birth rates. And what you're seeing in Iowa, as the board knows, is a consolidation of student population in a lot of centers like Des Moines, Cedar Rapids area, Iowa City area, and so forth. So I think it's important to realize that actually our open enrollment numbers look very good compared, you can see when you compare it to like Bettendorf, Pleasant Valley, Burlington, Marshalltown, you can see a significant difference in our open enrollment rates. The next and I think this is exciting to see, is when you look at our pre-K numbers. One of our goals that we had for pre-K was to increase the number of students that currently are not getting preschool, getting more of those students into preschool. So we had about 20% of our students that weren't currently getting into preschool prior to this year. What's exciting about these numbers is you can see that our pre-K program is increased significantly. It's gone from 160 students to 220. At the 4-year-old level, it's gone from 115 to 169. But I think what's even more important than that is that we've also seen at the same time our private schools that we fund, our private daycares, our private preschools, they have a total of 138 students. So you take that 138 students plus our 169, and that comes to 307 students that are currently being served in preschool as 4-year-olds. And what's exciting about that is that tells us that we're getting at those students that were not previously going to preschool. And so by consolidating the center, and I know a lot of the board members have a chance to have been out there, it's an amazing place. They're doing a great job. The program is fantastic, and the services we're offering students now is at a level I've never seen before. So it's exciting. It certainly has had the impact I think we were hoping for, and I think we'll even grow from here. So I thought you'd be interested in some pre-K numbers. The next chart talks about average class sizes. And I've worked with class sizes long enough to know that, yeah, class sizes can be, you can manipulate class sizes, it can be misleading, but the reality is sometimes the reality. What these are homeroom numbers, and that's the best way to get class sizes at a elementary. And you can see from 6 years ago, they were our elementary level is 21.7, and actually this year it's 21.6. Sometimes you have, the thought comes up, well, you have some classes that have 28 students or 30 students, and that's absolutely true. Your homeroom's average, which is where that student is with the teacher most of the time, these are the averages. Our large class sizes at the elementary level, when you get to 28 or 30, we don't have usually any individual classes that have that with just one teacher. Almost all those classes are with 2 teachers, and I'll take 2 teachers anytime in a classroom of 30 students at a 15 average. I'll take that all day, every day. And that has a huge impact on students, a huge positive impact. So you can see by class sizes that our class sizes look good at the elementary level. The next chart kind of shows what are the class sizes by building. And when you look at the class sizes by building, you can see our lowest class size is at 19.8 at Mulberry. One of the things that I think the district's really pleased with and has strived for is to lower our class sizes at some of our higher free and reduced buildings. So you can also see Jefferson as well as Franklin have some of our lowest class sizes out of all of our elementaries as well. So I think that's a real positive as well. And then our overall district class size, K through 6, is 21.9. Again, when you're talking about class sizes of those numbers across the state, they're very, very competitive. You're not seeing a lot of districts our size with a lot lower class sizes than that. Our next chart shows, it breaks it out a little bit more, and it breaks it out by total student enrollment in the buildings. You can see what it was last year compared to this year, average class sizes this year, and the number of sections. And probably in about 10 minutes or so, you're going to hear from Stephanie talk a little bit about how they're going to propose using portables. And oftentimes, we equate it as a negative when you have, say, 40 students in a classroom with 2 teachers. Again, I don't see that as a negative. And in fact, the teachers that had the opportunity with the portable to maybe change some things, they decided to stay with that. They wanted to stay with 2 teachers in one classroom rather than going to a different classroom because they thought they were having the impact they wanted to. So when you look at our sections, we have 2 situations in our district. One is at 2nd grade at Madison that has 3 teachers with 2 classrooms. One is an extra large classroom. And then you have at Grant at 6th grade where you have 3 teachers with 2 classrooms. The average class size in those sections are about 18 to 19 when you base it on number of teachers. So the next chart will kind of show, because I know there's been a lot of talk about Madison and what their numbers are, and because of the increase from Colorado, that the class sizes have gone up dramatically or they've changed a lot for the negative. You can see here by this chart, it shows our student population at Madison hasn't led to larger class sizes. In fact, it's gone down. 2014, we had 23.23. This year, we're at 22. I would be the first to say that we do have space issues at Madison. Our two elementaries that have the biggest space issues right now are Madison and then Grant, are 2. So I do think there are some space issues. Stephanie, when she speaks, she's going to talk about how many complaints she's had about lunch or how many complaints she's had about space issues. And I think you're going to find that she hasn't had a lot of complaints. And that's partly because the Madison as well as Grant have done an amazing job dealing with some of those space issues. So I thought that would be helpful to see. The next one kind of goes into what class sizes at the high school. In a few minutes, Corey's going to talk about class sizes at the middle school and also projected class sizes so the board can see what those look like. But when you look at our high school class sizes right now, you look at our cores, and then you look at our electives, we're at 20.92. So the smaller class sizes you're seeing at the elementary as well as middle school in a few minutes also transcend to the high school. Having a lot of high school experience, you don't see many high schools our size with a class size of 20.92. That's very rare. Again, you can manipulate these numbers if you want to, so we tried to give you a very accurate where we take out all the small sections, special ed, at-risk classes, those type of things, because you can really manipulate class sizes at the high school level. This is truly core class sizes for your regular ed classes. So when you look at that, you can see that, again, our numbers are very reasonable, and we would expect those to continue with the numbers that are coming up through the elementary. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Corey's going to go over some middle school enrollment information.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Good evening, everyone. So when we get to the middle school conversation here, this chart that I've put together here kind of gives you the projected look over the next 5 years past this year with what we're anticipating for numbers based on the enrollment data that we have K through 6 right now. So you can see our current combined enrollment through Central and West this year is at 759 students. And that includes, again, both 7th and 8th grade at Central and West. Looking forward into next year, you see we drop into 752, and that is bringing up the 6th grade, sending the 8th grade to the high school, and taking 7th grade up to 8th grade. So that's kind of how that works. You'll see that carry through. Going forward into 2024, 2025, you can see we're about 150 students less, and sitting at 602 as a projected enrollment for that year. Mike, if you would take us to the next slide. When we get to the middle school and high school level, we kind of move away from the homeroom discussion and we move into an idea of looking at section numbers. And what we're looking at there is taking the number of students that we have in our middle and high schools and looking at how do we create a schedule during their day that involves all of their core classes, so ELA, math, science, and social studies, as well as exploratory options that we have for students. And how do we create a schedule that's balanced with class sizes that result in these averages here. So what I've got in this chart is taking a look at our current average numbers of our sections in each of those departmentalized areas, both at Central in the first column and at West in the second column. So you can see that in our ELA sections at Central currently, on average, we have approximately 20.6 students. West is at 20.5. In math, again, 20.6 at Central, a little higher at West with 22, and so on and so forth down. The departmental average there at the bottom, taking into account all of those core departments in our exploratories. This year at Central, we're experiencing average class sizes of 21.5 students, and at West, 21.3. So if you were to take those numbers that we, and again, these are our general education students. These are not taking into account our special education students who may be in a self-contained ELA or a self-contained math. So we've been able to work through those numbers, identify those students, and make this just based on what we're offering for our general education population here. If you were to look forward into next year based on that number from the previous slide, 752 students combined at Central, combined Central West 7th and 8th grade, and then take a look at the ability that we would have to offer sections. What we have, our intention to move all of our staff from Central at this point with the merger to West in those core areas will allow us actually some increased flexibility with scheduling to be able to actually get some smaller class average sections when it comes to each of those areas. So we're excited about that opportunity, just being able to have some more flexibility. So the question now becomes, now that we have those students scheduled, where do we put them? So I'll turn that over to Chris, and he can talk a little bit about our plan for mapping students out in the building at West.
And also, I can't believe I forgot Jeff Miller will also join Chris with this. Sorry about that, Jeff.
Okay, well, we projected the map. It's a little hard to see from there, but I think everybody up front here has a map in front of you. I'm just going to give you a little bit of background here on West to start with. It was built in like 1964, and due to the hard work of Mr. Morgan up here, he went back and kind of did some enrollment through the 70s of the building. So if you're looking at the building right here in 1964, basically it's about half of the size as it is now. Okay, so this thing doesn't really work. Yeah, there we go.
The Vanna White of Muscatine.
So it's basically half the size. So you're going to go all the way there and then, yep, straight down. That's it. That's the building. And that stayed that way until 1988. So in the early 70s, Mr. Morgan went back and found that we actually had 800 to 1,000 students in that little part of that building in the early 70s. The enrollment 6 through 8 through the late 70s and 80s then kind of went down into the 600. So it was somewhere, from 600 to 700 each year. 1988, we built the back part of the building. So it added all of those back rooms. And then in 2003, we added that large gym on the far left over there. And that's the history of the renovation of the building there. So there has been a lot of students in this building before. And I can assure you that it's not as efficient as it is now. So when we started this journey last year, we've been working hard at this for a year. We knew that we needed to put in some time and effort to make this transition go the way we want it to go. And so we worked with Leggett, the architects that we use here at the school district, and just for some initial, hey, do we have enough space to even do this? And after working with them, they came back and they had some ideas on how to use the spaces that we currently have a little bit differently. But we were all pretty comfortable, including them, that we could fit the 752 students into our current building with our current classrooms. So here's what we want to propose to do to West. So anything in red is kind of what we're going to touch in the building on that map. Okay. So like I said before, really we wanted to find unused spaces that we don't use at all and figure out how we can better utilize those spaces. So knowing that when we combine two buildings, the first things we're going to look at are our largest classes. Well, our largest classes are band, choir, and orchestra. And so we said, okay, is the space for band, choir, and orchestra large enough for having another 350 kids in this building? And they probably weren't up to the size that we maybe need for next year. So what we did is look at the current band room, so Corey can kind of point there, and the current orchestra room. So that's like 3, 4, and 5 right there. Okay, so the current wrestling room on the far left over here, number 29, okay, is a space that we use basically for wrestling. Okay, it gets used 6 or 7 weeks a year for practice and meets, and not even meets, actually, for practice, and then we have our little kids wrestling program in there. So that space is not used at all during the school day. Okay, it's a really large space, and what we thought we would do is change the current band and current orchestra room into that given space, the current wrestling room. Okay, it's going to take a little bit of remodeling, but that space is really large, and it's going to be a great space for them. We got the orchestra and band teachers into that space, and they actually came up with the plan for that room, and we are the proposal is to follow everything that they've asked from that room, and they're really excited about that room. And that room hasn't been touched since 1974, so it's fairly disgusting. So what that does is it allows us to open up those other 3 rooms there, number 3, 4, or 5, and create some different, more classrooms. So in essence, we moved band and orchestra to 1 room, and then we got 3 rooms out of that, okay? So the same situation. So if we scroll all the way to the left, Corey, to the stage, the next space that we don't use at all, and we were going back through time with Mr. Schur and Mr. Morgan just trying to figure out when was the last time anybody's even used this stage, because it just doesn't get used at all, okay? But it is an actual really nice space again. So it kind of just made sense that we could get choir into that space. So we got with the choir people. They kind of walked us through what they would like to see out of that. And the biggest thing there is there's a temporary wall. That's where that red line is. That would have to become a permanent wall, and then some painting and some things like that. But that space is almost double the size of their current classroom space. So that opened up another room, the choir room, if you scroll back down to the bottom right there. Bottom right. Down by, yep, keep going. So number 6 there. So there's another classroom that we opened up. So just looking at the map in general, if you looked at the whole thing, I numbered out the exact number of rooms that we have. So we have 49 rooms. So scroll all the way out, will you, Corey? Yep. So there's 49 usable classrooms. The projections of numbers of staff and the number of rooms that we'll need for that staff comes out to be about 46 out of the 49. Okay, and obviously the 3 other rooms are going to get used. We just haven't dictated what we're going to do with those yet. So here's what I can tell you. Every teacher will have their own room if they teach all day long in the school building. Okay, there will be some teachers that share classrooms. Okay, special ed teachers sometimes only teach 2 or 3 periods a day. They will share with another special ed teacher that teaches 2 or 3 periods a day, okay? But we will not have more than 1 class in any room. So there won't be 2 classes forced into 1 room. We have enough space that we don't have to do that, if that makes sense. So that kind of gives you an overview of the building, the number of rooms we have, the number of rooms we're going to need. And so if we look at big picture, though, there's a lot of other questions here. So we'll start with lockers. Okay, do we have enough lockers? Well, when we repainted the building last year, we actually started to think about this. So we painted all of the old blue lockers at West that you used to see purple, which are really nice, but we also added about 6 more banks of lockers to get us up to the 750 that we would need for our students. So lockers are not an issue. Okay, and the next big thing people want to think about is lunches. So the lunch space, the current cafeteria space, if you can point that out, Corey, right there. So we currently hold 2 lunches at West, one for 7th grade and one for 8th grade. We have about 185 students in each one. Okay, so that's what we have. We have about 200 seats, 185 students. Okay. So next year, we're going to have 750 kids. We're like, okay, how are we going to get all these lunches? So instead of having 2 lunches, we've come up with a schedule that allows us to have 4 lunches. So if I take the 750 divided by 4, I get about 188 students. It's almost exactly the same. So getting the students through the lines, having enough time for lunch, and seating for lunch are all things that I think we've solved. Okay, what we did want to do, though, is for this space is, it is kind of tight, I mean, in that cafeteria as is. And that's what we currently do, and that's what we've always done. It's just not a very big space. So the proposal here, you can see those 2 red lines that go into the small gym where it says new entrances and air conditioning. What we want to do is open up about a 6-foot doors in those 2 spaces to open that cafeteria to that gym. That'll allow us to use maybe half of that gym with more tables and really just spread the kids out more at lunch. Most of your issues come around lunchtime, and so just getting them in a little bigger space and spreading them out will really help. So the other proposal there is the air conditioning for the gym. Okay, that gym is really hot when it's early on in the fall and late in the spring. It gets really warm in there, and so we do have a proposal to air condition that space as well. You back out, yep. So, athletics would be another big thing. How are we going to take everybody from Central, all the teams and all the players and all the practices, and make it work at West? So the first thing I think we got to remember is we have access to other gyms. So the McKinley gym is a full-size gym, just like Jefferson's gym. So we knew that we were going to have to use that gym, okay, at McKinley. But we'll also have access to be able to use Central's gym and Jefferson's gym. We already transport kids back and forth right now. Okay, our football team, our track team, our cross-country team are all combined. So every single day there's already buses that take those kids back and forth through those buildings. Okay, so I think that gym space is not going to be an issue, because if we really want to, we can use Jefferson's gym, we can use Central's gym, we can use our current big gym, our current small gym, and now we have the McKinley gym. So we actually, if you use all of those spaces, we'll have more gym space than we do that we currently use. Okay. One of the things that we want to look at with the name change to Susan Clark was our uniform situation. And what I can say is we're kind of ragtag together. It's always kind of been this way in middle school. You get kind of hand-me-downs, and you buy, little mesh jerseys and shorts, and, there's just not a lot of money for that. And, part of the maybe unintended consequences of moving to one building would be that we really wanted to upgrade some of these things. So I brought a proposal to Mike and Jerry about let's just buy all new uniforms. Okay, we knew that we had to rename and get everything right as far as the Susan Clark Junior High School goes anyway. So we have a proposal to purchase all new uniforms that will be matching. They're reversible, and they're really high quality uniforms. And I think our coaches and our athletic director and people that know and are aware of this are really excited, because honestly, we don't put out a first class program very well with what our kids wear. And so I think that'll really help. So the current athletic storage shed, one of the things of using the wrestling room does is we have our football team does change in the current wrestling room, and that's where their locker space is. So we knew we would have to address that. So what we're going to do is there's a shed down, right in that area, that is for storage for athletic equipment. That shed is going to become like a football team locker room. We'll get the lockers placed in there. We need to get electricity in there and just get it cleaned out. But it'll be a really nice space for the kids that's their own, that they can use for football. In order to do that, we needed to build a new athletic shed, which would be placed somewhere closer to the fields, to the left there. So, and just back to, the middle schools and having practices again, the plan is to keep practices the same as they are now after school. I think that, with all of that gym space that I just mentioned, there's not going to be any need to move practices to the mornings. Okay, all of our coaches are going to move from Central to, we're retaining all of our coaches. Okay, so we're not planning on cutting down at all the number of coaches or teams that we have. We're just going to have to be creative in how we get those things scheduled and played out. But we'll continue to have 2 teams just like we have now, and we'll continue to have other teams that will be able to play with the facilities that we have. So, what else do I have? Okay, so traffic would be probably the last thing that people would think about here. So the first thing I'm going to preface that with is, as soon as the McKinley turnaround got finished, the traffic out in front of West Middle School completely changed. Okay, it used to be very dangerous and very packed, and it was tough. And the McKinley turnaround, where they now have to enter McKinley from Follium, has reduced our traffic to almost nothing out in front of West. Okay, where it used to take 15 or 20 minutes to get everybody out from the front of the building, it takes 1 or 2 minutes now. Okay, now the thing that's still dangerous, I think, is our pickup our pickup at the end of the day with our busing, and that currently is in the front of the building. And the bus is parked there. The plan will be to get those buses to the south of the building here. So all the pickup will be in where the current parking lot is. And we think that we really feel that will allow students or parents for students that do get dropped off or picked up to have that all happen out front. It's just a really dangerous situation where kids are darting through those buses all lined up right now to cross the street and things like that. So we feel like we have enough space down on the south end of the building to do drop off and pick up. So we also knew that we needed more parking. And so that parking lot is a proposal in the bottom left-hand corner of the map. That lot will, paving that portion will add about 35 to 40 more parking spaces for the building. Last thing, just the aesthetics of the building. Going to Susan Clark Junior High, obviously the front sign needs to be worked on. All the signage really in the building. I talked about uniforms for our players. The gym, the large gym is still painted. The floor is still painted as west, and the bleachers are still blue and gold. And we have a proposal to update all of those things as well as paint the scoreboards are purple. But we've done a lot of that already, so there's just a little bit left there to do. And I guess that's it. There's a lot of stuff. Questions?
Mike or Chris, currently at lunch, the kids go out into the courtyard. Is that correct? Like
Yep.
during good weather?
Yep.
In bad weather, they go out into the small gym. How's that going to be handled?
Yeah, I think that if we only use half of the small gym, we could still use half of it. But I also think that, I'm thinking like you're only going to put 4 or 5 tables in there. We could probably get those out of there pretty quickly. When lunch, the last 10 minutes, we could get those cleaned up, moved out, and have the whole gym space for them. But they'll at least have half and the courtyard.
Chris, you mentioned lunches and for lunches. I'm curious to know, have you been able to walk through timing of what time of day? Because I have an 8th grader right now.
Yep.
Who will be in
Yeah,
high
it's
school.
basically from 11 to 1 o'clock.
Okay, that
Yep.
would still all fit.
Yep.
Fill right
Yep.
there. Okay.
Yep.
The advantage of 4 lunches over 3, we could have probably easily done 3, but 4 lunches is a lot better because then you don't have staggered lunches where you're interrupting classes. They go to class for 15 minutes and they go to lunch and then they come back to class. So either one, I'd probably try to always do 2 lunches or 4 lunches.
This is a crazy question. Do you know if it's 1 o'clock? I'm thinking of my daughter who complains all the time to me that from the time she eats breakfast to the time she eats lunch at 12:30 is a long time. Mm-hmm. Is there an opportunity, will there be an opportunity, you think, for teachers for snacks or something of that nature for those kids who have lunches late? Because I think from 7:30 or 8 o'clock breakfast to 1,
right,
I would struggle.
Yeah, we already do. We run a snack shop. Our teachers do that where they sell basically at cost. We make snacks during the day as is. So so we'll continue to do that. Yep.
And Chris, the last lunch would start probably 12:30 to 1, right? It'd be
it's something like that. I have the exact numbers and I can get them out to you guys.
Be at 1.
No, it'll be done.
O'clock.
It'll be basically start at 11, be done by 1.
Gotcha. Would a student have the opportunity to bring their own snack?
Oh yeah, we always allow them to bring their own snack. Yep.
I'd like to say that, first of all, thank you for the time we got a chance to do a tour of all of the different schools. And it was very much an eye-opening seeing all of the construction and how busy everybody is trying to make everything work. The thing that I did not hear you say, and I just want to be able to have you help us on, is when you were talking about the wrestling and using that with band, because I remember you indicating something about because of those type of mats and then how much easier it's going to be or something to be able to change that out and be ready for band and different things.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I failed to mention that. Thank you for bringing that up. The current wrestling room will no longer house wrestling, and we really worked hard and trying to think about how we could keep wrestling at our building rather than farm that to a different building, because that's a sport that really we want to house it in our building to generate more interest in the sport, because we generally have low numbers for wrestling. So if you go down here to the current Project Lead the Way, there's a current Project Lead the Way room right there. That's a very large room. Yeah. That room is going to become the wrestling room. Yeah. It's not as big as the current wrestling room, okay, but it's really a good size for the number of students. We only have about 20 to 30 students per year, so we don't have a ton. So I think what you're talking about, Karen, one of the proposals is to help make that transition is to buy a new lightweight wrestling mat that's easily movable, because we're not going to do meets in there. We would still do meets in our gyms. And if you know anything about old wrestling mats, they're big and heavy, and they used to take like 4 or 5 or 6 kids to roll up and move. These new mats take one person. They come in pieces, and one person can roll them up and move them around. That space will be the wrestling space, and I think it's going to be a really nice space for them. And again, the wrestling coaches are really excited about having their own space still in the building.
And it's going to be a really nice space for the younger kids wrestling program, because it has a restroom in there and, and an outside entrance, and so people, as they bring their kids in for the little kid wrestling, it'll be a much more convenient space.
Right. Yep.
Well, Chris, excuse me, I have a question. You know, I'm just trying to process numbers here in my brain here. So if we are having 4 lunches, and on average we are talking about 188 students, right, for each lunch. So assuming that's half hour for each lunch, 188, so we'll be serving around 7 students every minute. So are we saying that the last 7 students will have only 1 minute to eat their lunch? So how are we going to work out that?
We currently serve that many students. And I will tell you that there is 10 to 15 minutes at the end of each lunch where the kids basically go to recess. So most of the kids, I would say 80% of the kids are done with lunch with 10 to 15 minutes to go. So we have a passing time, 25-minute lunch, and a passing time. So there's a little bit of wiggle room too on both ends of that. So you actually, kids have about 30 minutes probably, to get their lunch, eat. But we currently have no issues getting the students through the lines, okay, and sat down and ate, and then also they have opportunity to have a little playtime.
You're not anticipating having all 188 kids come at once.
Right.
And they don't go through one line.
Right. There's multiple lines, but basically, so we'll have 4 lunches. So 188 kids will be assigned to a lunch, and and if you want to see this in action, I will invite you to come over to lunch, because right now that's what we do. They all come and they get in line. It's very organized, and we have people helping them get through to the right line, and they get them through a lot faster than you would think. And the other thing you got to think about too, it's 188, but I would like to see the actual number of lunches served is not near that. Probably 60%. We have students absent, number one, but then we probably only 60% of that probably eat a hot school lunch. And so you're not actually sending 188 through the lines every time. Does that make sense?
John, when we looked at lunches, that's why we went to 4 lunches, decided on 4 lunches, is because that almost assures that it's going to go well and that kids will have enough time. When you go to 4 lunches with 180 kids in that size of area, I don't think that's going to be, if it is, they'll monitor it to you can always add a line if you have to get more kids through there, but I don't think that's going to be necessary.
Yeah, the reason why I'm asking is just to make sure that, for example, if we need more staff to serve lunches so that the lines will be faster, that would be definitely an issue.
Yeah, and I think the good thing is we've been one thing I've probably failed to mention is, for the most part, everybody working at Central is going to work at West. And not to a T for everybody, but as far as safety and the concerns about safety in our building, we're going to have double the staff, including double our safety staff. And I'm very comfortable with the amount of students that we have coming in and the amount of space that we have. I don't foresee there being near the issues that you might think there would be, and I think that you're going to hear from Mrs. Colvin and Mrs. Negus here in a few minutes about all the work that the teachers have done leading up to this, and I think that we put a lot of time and effort into making sure that this transition's right, because there are huge educational benefits that we're not thinking about to this move. And it's always been West versus Central, and it's always been 2 buildings, and we could never assure that the kids coming out of West and the kids coming out of Central were getting the same things. And so this is going to ensure that being under 1 building, we're going to have teachers all working together, we're going to have kids all working together, and it's going to be something that's going to be a great benefit from an educational standpoint to our students in this town. And so I'm really comfortable with the plan that we have.
Chris, would you want to review maybe the construction cost to go through it?
Can I ask, before you go to that, can I ask you a question on the map?
Sure.
Thank you for putting this together. This is great, and the visual is really helpful. I want to make sure that I understand. So parent pickup will be in the front of the building.
Correct.
Or what today is the front of the building. Buses are going to come alongside, and I'm trying to visualize that parking lot. Plenty of space for the buses to line up, come through. They'll drive down to the field, circle, and come back out.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Especially with the addition of this new lot. We may have to reorganize some the way it looks right now, parking-wise, may change a little bit to give them that space to turn around. But they do that right now. They turn around in that space. So they go down and buses that come in there to drop off for events or games or whatever, they come right down there and they turn and go right back out.
And there's parking that's in the, I'm going to call it in the center. We don't lose that because there's still plenty of space if the bus comes in that they can still circle around, right?
Right, yep.
So as they pull in and line up, kids will be able to find, just like they did up front, I got to go find my bus number, what I'm getting on, and then they'll all process out essentially once it's time for them to leave.
Right.
Fair statement?
You got it.
The parking spaces, is that just green space today?
Yes. Yep. It's just going to be an addition to the end of the lot ends almost exactly where my line starts there. So the lot ends in the big gym right where the new parking is. So it doesn't seem like it. It seems like it goes to the end of the new gym, but it doesn't.
Okay.
And so this one will actually extend past the end of the big gym.
So we don't lose any parking here. So truly another 45 extra spaces that we'll get there.
Right.
Okay. That makes
Another area I guess I didn't hear talked about was the courtyard itself. Is that
The courtyard?
what do you do with that? Sorry.
What was your question? Sorry.
Well, I guess because I remember looking at it, it's not in the best of shape, compared to what you're trying to do for the rest of the building.
Yeah.
And so, is there something you're looking at to deal with that, or how that is being utilized?
Not initially in this plan. It's a really nice space, and one of the things that we thought about is could we use that space to increase some or make new classrooms, but I don't think that was real feasible after working with the architects. But yeah, I think that it does need a little TLC, I will tell you that. Yeah. So it would be nice to make an outdoor type of classroom situation to help use that space, but that's not something that we had anticipated doing at this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Also, Chris, I guess before you go on, I have a concern, I guess, with the locker room space, because we're going to end up having 3 classrooms. We're going to have three phys ed teachers. Is that correct? Or more, 4, 3?
Yeah, no, it'll be probably 2 if we keep the same structure that we have right now, which is the plan would be it's 2.5.
Okay.
So there'll be some periods. Yes, that you'll have 3, but only half the time.
Okay, so potentially we could have 45 boys or 45 girls in that locker room space.
Yeah, and honestly, the locker room space is an issue now. I mean, that's just something that when that big gym was built, that was not thought through very well in 2003. So I think it's something where we know will be an issue during those periods, and we'll provide extra supervision in that area during that time.
Chris, hopefully I'm the last question. I don't know.
Hey, Mike, will you pull your mic down to you? Our audience is having a little trouble
You want
here.
me to hold it like this?
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Chris. So typically you do your scheduling Can you give me an idea of of the timeline of the scheduling so that we don't have to look at the averages? Because I know that if it's anything like the past, typically by February 1st or so, you have an idea, a rough idea at least, what the sections are going to look like. Because I do know I appreciate it, having done that in the past, that there's the very first year I walked into West and had to sit down and apologize to Brian Mathis because class sizes were 25, but he had 33, 36, 37 in the afternoon and 15, 14, and 17 in the morning. I couldn't do anything about it. I just couldn't move kids. And a lot of it has to do with the specials and the band and the orchestra and the different classes. I'm sure that's kind of what's happening at the elementary level too, is that kids want to take upper level math classes so that you can only meet one time. Sections are small. Can you give me an idea when that's
we've actually we wanted to get that done sooner than normal. So we have a real rough schedule done right now. It needs a little bit of TLC in a few areas. So I'm hoping to have that done by early January, to where we have exact numbers of students in classes. But here's what I'll tell you. I did the high school schedule and now the middle school schedules for a long time, my whole career. What's going to help, what you're talking about is the range of kids in classes goes from 16 to 30 at this middle school, because the specials and things like that affect what periods those things are offered, affect the classes during those periods. Having everybody here essentially doubles all of the sections of all of our classes. So when we do that, okay, that the scheduler will be able to more consistently make classes evener, if that's a word. So more even.
It is now.
It is now. So when there's more sections of a class, that we'll be able to have numbers that are more closely related. So we won't have as big of a range. So, generally, if the average is 20, usually what I do is you can plus and minus 4 or 5. So you can go from 16 to 24, 25, and that's what it will be.
Thanks.
Okay, and so then the last thing, I tried to color code, again, the costs of those things on that next sheet with the map, okay? And then I organized it by kind of the area that they're going to do. So I'm not going to talk real specifically about this. It's more if you have questions. Jeff has done a great job of getting prices for all of these things. So if you have questions about what exactly we would do after looking at that, I can answer those, or Jeff can help me answer those. But for the most part, you'll see some classroom updates, some building updates, so the fine arts areas that we talked about, and then some athletic costs. And one of the athletic costs, we know that the track and the field, and that's something that, going to this, I keep going back to, I want this to be done in a first-class way. And some of our facilities have been let go, quite honestly, over the last few years, and we're feeling the ramifications of those things. So I think that you'll find, even this year with our equipment and the things that we have for our players, is we've really worked hard at getting better things for our kids in those areas. So we know the field and the track need some work, and we're planning on putting some time and effort into that, and you'll see that up here.
I have one more, Chris, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Out of the 49 classrooms, you see you have 7 that are going to be dedicated to special ed. Are those dedicated purely to special ed, or will they be used for, if they're available, are they going to be used?
They'll be just special ed.
Special
yep.
ed?
Right.
Right. Chris, I have a question. So do you need anything else to make this more efficient? So do you need more time? Do you need more money? Do you need fewer students?
I think that proposal there, I think you can see the total cost. That really captured all of kind of the things that we wanted to do too. The offices are a mess. If you've ever been there, we know we're going to have more staff, and just the size of the offices and how they're organized, and having to have offices on the left-hand side and the right-hand side of, so we want to be able to reorganize that to where it makes sense, where people can, find what they need more easily. So that was kind of a big thing that is included in that cost. But yeah, I think that, for the most part, everything is captured there that we wanted.
I'm just asking if we had unlimited time and resources, would you need any more to make it more efficient?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple.
Would you take a year? Would you take 2 years? Would you take $200,000 more dollars? Would you, is there anything, or is this a good plan, be implemented effectively and efficiently and all that?
Yeah, I think that this is a good plan. I think that, there's some long-term things that, Mr. Scher brought up. The locker room space is a long-term. That's an issue. And then, obviously everybody knows we only have 2 auditoriums in this town, and one of them could potentially be going away. So I think long-term, there's space, we have a lot of space there, but I think long-term, those 2 issues could be addressed, in a few years. But as far as having class and feeling comfortable and making this transition successful, I think that it will work the way we have it set up.
This time period and all that.
Yeah.
I think what helped is, all new furniture the last couple of years. We've repainted the whole building as well.
Yeah,
those things have helped a lot.
Yeah.
I guess I have a question for Jeff. Seems like we're having a lot of renovations. Are you going to be able to do this in the time period that's allowed to you from school?
This
All this renovation, and are we doing it ourselves, or are we contracting this out?
We'll contract it out. Those numbers are contracted out numbers. I have gone to several contractors, gotten different numbers, taken the lowest. What you see up there is the lowest bids. If the board approves this, we will actually be able to start on some of these somewhere around the late February, early March area, because they're not being used right now. So that throws us ahead of the game. I see no issue, to answer your question, of getting this done.
So you're comfortable with the construction being finished by school next year?
Yes, there is no turnaround. It'll be fine. So, yep, good question.
Yeah, like the current wrestling room that's not used, and so after wrestling season, we can get to work on that. There's things like that we can get moving on.
This may sound kind of like a different question, but because looking at the numbers, it was built in 1964, expanded, you said, in 1988, so that's 24 years. And so then now, with here being 219, that's roughly about 31 years later. Would be something that normally we would be working on anyway, whether or not we have this expansion area going on for the kids coming?
And we're going to talk a little bit about that at the end, but
okay.
You're looking at West is almost 60 years old, and you typically on a public building look at about 80 years for a life expectancy of a school. So the question was about, what's the best plan moving forward? All of these plans are intended to give the district 7 to 10 years to figure out how they're going to replace some buildings, because you currently have 3 elementary buildings that are 65 years old. There's a lot of facility issues moving forward that we're going to have to address, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I was having a conversation the other day with someone. They were talking about the new middle school, and I said, well, West is almost 60 years old, and they went, no, I always thought of it as new. It's kind of like the high school. The high school is not a new building anymore, and every building when they get age on them they need care and updating.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, when you look at this plan, what keeps you awake at night?
Well, it all did initially, but I think again, if we go back to just really, it was what's our staffing going to be, and once we kind of got the go ahead, that for the most part, all of the staff is coming, then that made me feel a lot more comfortable, because I just, I know, I was at the high school again for a long time. It's very large and there's a lot of kids. So 750 kids really doesn't scare me that much. But if I don't have enough, staffing to feel, to make that place secure and safe, then it would scare me. But I feel really confident that we're going to have what we need to make that happen.
What about, are you still considering one-way hallways?
Yeah, I think that, the hallways, are probably a little small, and really that main, if we went back to the map, the main hallway is the biggest issue. So as far as space goes, so that would be that top right hallway right there. That's where most of the classrooms are. Okay, that hallway there's just a lot of rooms, and the kids get out there quick. So there's going to have to be some kind of system in place, and just one of the ideas was making some portions of this one way, because when the kids open their lockers and stand at their locker on both sides, it leaves only a little bit of space really down the middle. And again, really the only issues are that hallway. So whether we come up with a system where we have, I know they've done this and that they did this in the past at West, where they put a line down the middle of the hallways and then you just work with the kids, if you're going right if you're going one way and left the other way. So, but if we did a one-way system, it would probably be something with that hallway, just because it is narrow there. I think all the other areas are fine.
You're talking just that short area, right?
Yeah, right, just that short. So it'd be basically, if we did a one-way thing, it'd be
not all the way down.
Right, just from right there to left.
The other way, left.
Up, right there to the left.
All the way to the left.
Yep. Right there, that would be it, if we did it. Okay. So next, Mrs. Coleman and Ms. Negus are going to come up and talk about kind of what the teachers have done over the last year to help prepare.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about some of the logistics, and probably the biggest logistical thing is bringing everybody together into one building. And we know over a very long time, we've had Central and West, and the students, they like to compete against each other. Their teams have competed against one another. And the same is true for the teachers who take pride in their building. We have many teachers that have been in their building for a very long time that are like, yes, people used to be like, yes, I'm a Central Charger, and now it's really, well, I'm a Central Muskie. But the reality is that when we come together, our goal is to make sure that we create and foster an atmosphere where people understand that we're not just taking Central and moving it to West and renaming the school, so that students still have a sense, well, I came from Central and I came from West. Our goal is really to be able to bring them together and to say, this is our school, and we're the Susan Clark Junior High, and we are the Muskies, and to be able to separate ourselves, and the students and teachers, from that personal identity of, I went to West or I went to Central. Instead, focusing on, I go to Susan Clark Junior High. So in thinking about that, we know that that's going to be tough in bringing people together, and that we need to do some things in preparation for that. And that has already begun. So one of the things that has already happened is we have our athletic teams, we have 3 of them, that are already combined, where the students, as Mr. Nienhaus said, are already being transported between the 2 schools for practices to be able to come together as one team. It's currently already happening with football, cross country, and track, and then that will continue to be the case. We'll continue to combine, and that does mean we'll have lots more students, but I feel like at the middle school level, we've always strived really hard to make sure that we provide kids with experiences, meaning that they're not just trying out and then cut from a sport or activity. We want to be able to give them the opportunity to learn and to grow, and so that's going to be the plan moving forward as Muskies at Susan Clark Junior High. So that would be one of the things that we're looking at for our students.
Another item that we've been working on, last fall, I believe, volunteer teachers from both West and Central came together to talk about how do we want Susan Clark to look. So we've been meeting, I think last year we met monthly to talk about what to do. We're still meeting collaboratively to think about is the building going to look like, do we have enough space, all the way to how we're going to bring our staffs together. So we've talked a lot about how to bridge us as a staff, and so we have some fun mixers. If you want to invite, I'm sure we can share you with that. But mainly, if I could just kind of skip down there too, because I'm on this committee, we are concerned about the kids, especially that 7th grade group that's going to come from Central over to West, and how is that going to go for them, how are they going to feel. So we are thinking about having a student spring mixer where kids from Central bussed over, walked over, and kind of partner up with a West kid for a day or half day, and they would have a tour and kind of build that familiarity with the building. And then that would bleed into next fall a New Muskie Day for those new kids as well. So those are some things that we are thinking and planning to do to bridge the two buildings into one.
And we know that's really important because we want to create and foster a positive culture within the new building as everybody comes together. So we've talked a little bit about what we're going to do with students and bringing them over, getting them together, doing some team building activities, and really giving them a chance to get comfortable with what will be some new surroundings for some of the students. In addition to that, we've also talked about how we're going to bring teachers together, and Mrs. Negus mentioned some social gatherings that have already taken place and will continue to do so. But one of the things that we've also been working on between the two buildings is Leader in Me and fostering that. So Central started that process last year, and West has joined this year, but that's been a great opportunity where we've been able to have all staff engaged in some professional development that is really this year focused on the individual teachers and putting those habits into place so that when we merge together, we can present that information to the students and help to develop leadership skills within them. So I feel like that's one of the things that we've worked really hard on collectively so far. The other thing that's happened during our early outs that we've had, so far we've had 3, we're getting ready to have our 4th, and we have 2 more yet to go this year. And we've been working really hard with the joint departments and pulling all of the people together and really taking a look at the curriculum. And this is a great opportunity because, as Mr. Neenhouse had mentioned before, and even Mr. Spies, that it's been a long time since we've had everybody, it seems like, in the same room talking about our curriculum and trying to work together to make sure that kids at Central and West are actually having the same educational experience. And so as we've begun these conversations with these early outs for the departments, we've been able to have people have some professional conversations about what is best for students. What do we want them to learn? Where do we want them to be? What do we hope that we can accomplish? And I feel like that's really important work that's been moving forward. And we're looking forward to being able to continue that and having that go on. Okay. I don't know. Do you guys have questions for us about the work that's been done so far?
I hope you're here, the two of you are here for a reason I appreciate. I really couldn't wait to get to the teachers portion. No offense. The two of you are here for a reason, and you speak very positively. I'm curious, without mentioning names, are there, I don't want to say dissensions in the ranks, are there teachers who are not as positive as you, and why, and what's that sound like that you're hearing? The second thing is, we asked Mr. Neenhouse if we could have another $200,000 or another year, another 2 years, what's that look like? Are you comfortable? Are the majority of the teachers comfortable with the progress, with the speed of the progress of what this looks like?
So I can't speak for everybody, so I just want to put that out there right now, right? But I will say that anytime that I feel like you have a change like this, you have people who have a personal feeling about things, and then you have people who are also professionals if we're talking about teaching staff. And I think we're really fortunate in both buildings that people certainly have their personal opinions. I mean, there are people that are like die hard, hey, we want Central to stand, it is a great building, it's a historical place, like I want to be somewhere where there are hardwood floors and these big open windows and all of those things, right? There are people that don't want to give that up, and there are people that have been in those buildings, or especially at Central, for the duration of their educational career. It would be wrong of us to assume that they don't have emotional ties and have mixed feelings about moving into one building. Having said that, I feel like we work with professionals, and despite what other personal feelings that people may have about that, they recognize that this is something that we've talked about now for going on a year and a half, and they recognize that this is the direction that we are moving. And having said that, they've rolled up their sleeves, and while they might not be happy about every single step of the way, they're digging in and they're doing the work. And I think that's what's important, is that at the end of the day, they may have their personal feelings, but they are pushing up their sleeves ready to work. That's kind of what I've seen between both buildings. But I'll let Mrs. Negus speak to that.
Well, when you were talking to Denise, I fell into that first category. Central's been my home for 19 years, and being a history teacher, I walked in there and thought, oh, hardwood floors and windows, I love it, I want to be here forever. But you see the writing on the wall, or you know what's happening, so you get over it and you realize it's a good move to be on one page. You know, when we meet as a joint committee or department, there's always that lag and like, okay, having to refresh our memories of what we're doing, but if we're there all together all day, we're in it together. So that's a step in the right direction. I think my big concern, are we ready for the kids? Are there enough support services there for the students? Students are changing, and I don't know if we're there meeting their needs. Will there be enough counselors, enough resource navigators, wraparound services? That would be my concern.
Is that your concern just because of the move, or is that your concern just in general as what you see in teaching?
In general.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's going to be amplified as we move. I mean, I know we'll have the teachers there, but will that be enough to cover everybody?
Is that magnified also because of the doing it next year? Would another year give it more time to do that?
Again, my opinion, this is not
right.
Central's. The move will happen eventually.
Right, I
but
agree
let's
with
make
that.
it the best it can be. Would be my cautionary.
I feel pretty comfortable with the work that's been done, and people moving forward, and by all means, we are not done. There are still kinks to be worked out, things to discuss, decisions still yet to be made, you know, as we come closer, and really, like, we have these ideas and things, but really fleshing them out better. So that work still needs to happen. We're not done by any stretch of the imagination. And I guess the only concern that I would have, and I feel like it's already been addressed, would just be that we are lacking the space of an auditorium. So being able to have Central open still, at least the auditorium, and have that accessible to the public and the community for different activities, that's really my biggest concern. But I do feel comfortable, very comfortable with the work that's been done, not only, you know, from the logistics of the building to the work that we're doing with teachers, but also what we're doing to help strengthen and create an environment that's positive for students.
So I'm going to ask it in a slightly different way, but more time, more money. But what about phasing? So you spend a lot of time talking about getting the 8th graders comfortable with moving schools, or the future, the 7th graders now, the future 8th graders. What about leaving them at Central for their last year and bringing the new 7th graders into what, you know, so you're kind of phasing it. It's almost like half approach, right? So have you talked through things like that? Have you, you know, then you don't have all this, you have to get them to know each other and some of that. But is there anything like that that would help these transitions versus sort of forcing it in this year? Yeah, go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, no, so I think just from a logistical standpoint, kind of back to what I said earlier about those section numbers and being able to have the increased sections, the additional staff, I think I wonder to that question, Aaron, what would happen if we were to leave one grade at a school? I think we would be hard-pressed to provide enough opportunities and exploratories for that one grade level and to staff it and to meet the needs of 2 separate locations. So just from the standpoint of leaving one grade level at a building, I'm not sure that would be in the best interest from a middle school standpoint, just from a staffing standpoint.
Makes sense.
So.
If you didn't feel comfortable, would you have the courage to say, we need to hold off and wait?
I can only speak for myself,
Or
right?
with the committee, your committee, your
committee.
collaborative committee, would you think the group of you together, if you all thought we're moving forward, something wasn't right, could you feel confident enough to come to us or come to them and say, we need another year, we need 6 more months, we need something?
I think that through our discussions that we've had with our joint BLT, there have been things that we have disagreed on. And I think there are some things that we've kind of set off to the side and tabled as a result because we couldn't kind of necessarily come to a consensus or thinking through like what would that really look like. I think some of those things are still on the table and we're trying to figure out, is this really what's best for kids or not best for kids? Do we move forward with that or not? But I feel like those are more things that have to do with just making that transition to how do we align our junior high more with the high school and prepare kids better for high school. I don't know that they're specific to merging the two buildings together. So, but I do feel comfortable like within our group and saying, hold up, wait a minute, have we really thought about everything? I know that I feel comfortable, but I'm sure probably not everybody on the committee does.
I don't have anything to add other than I feel comfortable talking with my committee members, Chris and Corey, about any issues that present themselves as we continue to talk.
Thank you.
Well, excuse me, I want to go back to some of these points. First of all, thank you for being here and for answering questions and giving us some insight about this. Let's face it, it's a big move. A change always is, for me as a person, is good. It's a positive thing, but in order to go ahead and move forward, I want to make sure that everything every point is taken care of, everything is on the right direction, and I would go back again and think about some of the questions that Toby and Aaron perhaps asked, is that if you are thinking of one or two things that you think that we need still to work on or we need to change, what will be those one or two things you think that we still need to think about them before we move forward or we go ahead with that? And one major thing for me, because as I'm listening now, the student education and the quality of that education always is number one issue for me as a person. So given the fact that the quality of education is number one issue, so if you want to think more about this move, one or two things that you think that we still need to think about or work on, what will be those one or two things to say we are definitely ready to move forward?
I'm going to think about that and continue to think about that. But one thing that I didn't mention that I think is going to be a benefit is I think about my role this year as an assistant principal, and I'm split between two buildings. And I think that's unique for administrators. That typically doesn't happen. But it's given me some insight into probably what our exploratory teachers are feeling that are split kind of between, not only between the two middle schools this year, but also split at the elementaries as essential teachers as well. And we have some teachers that are split between 2, 3, and we have one teacher who's split between 5 buildings. And I think that this year has caused some stress for teachers and some frustration. And I can speak for my role as an administrator being split between 2 buildings that at times it is hard to be effective in both places. Right? Unfortunately, your time is divided. There are things that are going to be dropped. That's not the way that you want it to be. And I can say that our teachers are really giving their best effort, those exploratory teachers. But one of the things that we would gain by merging together is that those teachers would not be split so thin. And I think that's important. But I'll keep thinking about your other question.
And I would say with that, the plan is to reduce that. At the elementary level, you're going to have some specials that are going to have to cover multiple buildings, but we will not have any teachers going between levels anymore. So we won't have any middle school teachers that have to go to elementary. So they'll be housed either at elementary or at the middle school. So we knew that was going to be an issue this year. It's just moving the 6th grade back. We knew we had too much staff at the middle school and not enough at the elementary, but it was almost impossible to figure out how to move who, where to make it work. So we knew it was going to be a tough year from that standpoint, but we're working on a schedule that will eliminate that.
I got another question with it. You've done wonderful, pardon me with my voice, done wonderful as in explaining all these different things you're doing for collaboration that way. But I've also heard some parents tonight talk about some of their concerns in different capacity. But at the same time, what can we do to help make sure the parents are more involved in what and how some of these decisions and stuff are made? PTOs, anything along those lines, something that we can make sure that the communication is going well enough so they really know what has happened up to this point.
Yeah, no, I think that'll be one of the things that maybe Mrs. Zillig will address coming up, because I think one of those things is maybe the elementary conversation and concerns. Karen, I think maybe Mrs. Zillig will have an opportunity to speak about that here in a little bit. John, to your point, I was just going to think, one of the things that we're really excited about and looking forward to is trying to figure out how to align the work that we're doing as Susan Clark Junior High with the work that's being done at the high school. So one of the questions that we have that we're working through from an administrative standpoint, a committee standpoint, teachers who are looking at the curriculum are really saying, what do we need to do with this model to make sure that our students are prepared for high school? And I think Mr. Hoganson is even here maybe to talk a little bit about that, his perspective from a high school viewpoint this year. So hopefully we'll get to both of those things here with our next couple presenters, if that answers your question.
Corey, I guess I would challenge both you and Chris, and I know that you guys are doing a lot of work and you're really trying to take care of some of the teachers' concerns, but we've had the same group of parents come in, and so obviously I think that there's still some frustration that there's not a venue for them to be heard. It's 3 minutes that's not responsive from us to them. So if we could come up with some type of venue that they can be heard, and I know that the work, you guys are doing the work, I've seen it. And I think it's how do we communicate to our parents and to our community that yes, this is out there. If you have a valid concern, we'll listen, we'll try to come up with an approach. It might not be something that you like, but we'll at least have an answer for you. If we could work on that, I think that would just help us out as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, that's a great point. And I know I had the opportunity to meet with Chris and Mike and several of the parents, Molly, a couple weeks ago, and that was a great conversation. And we welcome that opportunity to kind of get together and brainstorm. We don't have necessarily the PTO meetings at the middle school level, right? So I would say my door is always open anytime a parent would like to come and just talk about some of those concerns. I feel like we're on the same page in terms of what we would, recommend. So, but we're always open with a listening ear as well to be able to say, how will this play out for my student, my child?
But I think that's a great idea, Mike. I think as the year progresses, we can look at having forums where we just invite parents in and share the plan with them and get their feedback. As Corey mentioned, we have Terry Hoganson, high school principal, is going to speak. He's, as you know, been at Central for quite a while, then high school, and as I know, a high school principal's always looking for something to do on a Monday night, so we appreciate Terry joining us.
You are welcome. I was going through trying to figure out what I was going to say, and then I was kind of marking off what people are already saying, so at this point, I'm just Terry Hoganson, the principal at the high school. I am in a unique position because I was at Central for 16 years. Now this is my second year at the high school. And so there's still a part of me that kind of has that green and white in my blood somewhere along the lines. But, I fully endorse this. I truly do. And, one of the things I know has been a question is when is a perfect time for this change? When should this happen? How should this happen? I can tell you that a lot of thoughtful consideration has gone into this discussion. This isn't something that's been haphazard or just pulled out of a hat. This has been very thoughtfully designed. I've been alongside listening to the conversations as it's gone. I know that there are people truly concerned about what's going to happen next, trying to make sure that the kids are taken care of, parents are taken care of. And so I know that those things are under consideration. And so I never know what a perfect time for change is. Is 1 year more, 2 years more? Maybe. You know, you can always use more time, but it also can stall out what you really just kind of sometimes need to get done. And I know that from being at Central for a long time, there were times when there were some like water pipes, like something would break, and they would have to go 2 to 3 feet into the wall to find even a part of the pipe that they could even do anything with because it was in such disrepair. So there's a lot of infrastructure that goes into that building that people just don't see because it looks like such a solid, beautiful building, which is still a big part of my heart for being there as long as I have with the staff that I was with. But I do want to highlight just a couple things again and reiterate some of the things that have been brought up previously that I want to say is a very, what I consider an advantage for the high school. One is those is that it eliminates the differences. We used to be able to hear things like, well, we can tell what students came from this school or that school based upon their writing skills or their math skills. And, you know, I don't think that was ever very fair for anybody in that conversation. And it'll be nice to have one center where you're able to deliver that curriculum consistently and know what kind of work is being done through that. Secondly, the resources can be better aligned. We can start looking at our staffing being better together, working collaboratively, having more people in certain areas that we can collaborate, work with training, PD. And for the first time, we can probably really look at having a 7-12 PD kind of performance. So we can look at it from a broader spectrum based on that. And finally, no way you could slice it, but no other way you could slice it, but whenever you have two centers, you were always, it's an us and them. What we were trying to do, what they were trying to do, the conversations were always separate. And, you know, there were times when we'd merge together and then go back in and say, but yeah, but you know, we're right because we're this, or they're right because they're that. And that was never, that's never a good situation. You know, I believe the movement for us all to be Muskies has been huge. And I believe the fact that we're all going to be one Muskie, starting with them coming at the middle level or junior high level, is essential for us. So I guess I would just say that for the reasons, I fully support this for the reasons that it benefits students, instruction, training, and unification. And that's, I guess, what I have to say.
Well, Terry, I think, again, thanks a lot for sharing this. For me, I don't think the issue is the unification. I do agree with you 100%. You know, when we put the two places together, we will definitely get rid of a lot of problems, misunderstanding, and it will be much better preparing them for the high school. I agree with you 100%. I think the issue that we are hearing from the parents right now, and we have been hearing that, meeting with them also at some point, and last meeting, this meeting, and so on. I think the question, if I may phrase that on their behalf, if I'm understanding the issue right, is are we really ready to put these two schools together right now? I think that will be the issue most probably. But yeah, I agree with you 100% that everything you said, by putting them together, will be definitely a much better for students to move forward together into the high school. Is just like the question, I think, are we ready to move forward with that?
And I won't, I'm not, you know, I'm just giving one different vantage point for that. And John, I agree with you that there's going to be always things, and I, as a parent, as someone, and I would always be wondering what is best interest for my children, and what, you know, and it's our job and our duty and our responsibility to embrace that and to make the best decisions we can for their benefit. Again, I can just say that I was sitting alongside Chris and Corey often during meetings, which really do turn into middle school meetings, by the way. I'm just letting you know that their conversations are truly focused on what is right and making sure that we're not doing this in a way that's going to ever be harmful to our student body. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Then finally, Jerry's going to kind of follow up with budget considerations.
Yeah, I know it's a long night, but I thought maybe I'd start with a little bit of a history of how we're at this spot. Almost 2 years ago, we started at the board meeting talking about some significant issues that were going to be critical for the district. We had declining enrollment, we had aging facilities, we had both of those affecting budget issues, and probably most importantly, we had some academic areas that need to be addressed that may have been created because of institutional factors. So we started looking at those, and there's really about 6 balls that we have been trying to juggle in this process. Mike mentioned the effect of declining enrollment. We've lost about $3.8 million in state aid. That would be enough of a challenge, but the last few years, our increased yearly cost is between 3 and 3.5%. State aid has only increased around the 2% or less each year. So besides the loss in revenue from what we had in enrollment declines, we were also not getting state increases that matched budget increases. We talked a little bit about the aging buildings. You know, we have, and what we looked at is where will we be in 11 years, 12 years? Well, you know, in 11 years from now, which is when kindergartners will be, I think, juniors or seniors, you're going to have Franklin, Grant, and Madison are going to be over 75 years old. You're going to have McKinley at 70, Mulberry at 68. Jefferson will be at 15 years and probably be about ready for some remodeling work. CMS will be 92. It's only about 8 years newer than the old Jefferson, with some of the same problems the old Jefferson had. And West will be at 70. So what we knew is that there's going to be an continuing pressure on our facilities, and how would we get and buy time for the district to take care of that problem. We also recognized from the academic side that we had way too many of our kindergartners coming in not ready for kindergarten. We knew that if they were involved in our preschool programs, they were significantly better prepared for kindergarten. We knew that we needed to reach more of them, and we needed a place for it. There was some talk at one point about trying to use them all. That was not economically feasible, which is what led us to Colorado. There, I think, are now more kids at Colorado than there were the year before when Colorado was an elementary building, with three-year-olds and 4-year-olds. We also knew we were losing 6th graders academically and socially at the middle school, that there was a performance drop from 5th grade to 6th grade, that we felt like it was an institutional issue. They weren't ready for that setting. We're losing 9th graders, that our 9th graders were not as prepared as they need to be successful 9th graders, and if you aren't a successful 9th grader, your chance of being a successful high school student and graduating really decrease. So you have all these balls in the air, and the issue of, well, what are you going to do about this? And sometimes it comes down to all you think about is money. No, it's not all I think about. I think about the kids that we have to serve, and I think about the teachers that I want to try and protect their jobs. We've had a tremendous drop in enrollment. We have not riffed a teacher. We have told teachers that if you're loyal to us, we're loyal to you, and partly because if you start riffing teachers, it gets really hard to attract teachers. It gets really hard to keep people and to attract them. The other thing that's out there is we knew that we had to provide a lot more services to our kids, and it was just brought up. We've added elementary counselors at every building. We've added additional nursing. We've added the family navigators, additional mental health services. We've added the pre-AP courses to provide more rigor for the elementary students. We have tried to make sure that we have added services to our kids every place that we possibly could. And we've had to do that at a time when we've had less resources. Now, there is not a business model in the world that allows you to spend more money than you take in. We cannot maintain the status quo. It would be great if we could just say, we're keeping everything we have, and it'll all be fine. Folks, you could do that for about 1 year. You'll have gone through your unspent budget authority, and you're going to have some problems maintaining that. What's going to happen then is you have to make choices. Do you cut programs? Do you cut teachers? What we have been trying to do is because in a general fund budget, folks, there's two big costs. It's staff, which is about 85 to 88% of your budget, and facility operation. And if you're going to have to cut your general fund, which is required when you get less state aid, you have a choice. You either have to RIF buildings or RIF teachers. We have opted to try and use our buildings as most efficiently as possible so that we could keep programs, increase services, maintain our staff, and do the best we can for our kids. I wish it could be different. I wish I had a magic wand and could just say, you get to have everything you want whenever you want it. That's not, Muscatine does not have the capacity to maintain the status quo. So as we move forward, I think there's been great questions and great concerns, and I certainly understand all of those. We wanted to try and buy 7 to 10 years of time with right-sizing buildings so that the town, the community can decide, how are you going to replace these buildings? You are not going to be able to save enough money in the SAVE and PEPAL funds to replace all these buildings. And you're going to have to start having a plan on what that's going to look like. Because I'll tell you, 7 to 10 years goes fast. And you're either going to have to look at major remodels, you're going to have to look at replacing some buildings, you're going to have to have, but there's going to have to be a plan moving forward. We've tried to buy you some time so that you can do that. You know, the question of would we wait a year? You certainly could wait a year to do something with Central. Just understand that to do that, you're going to eat up some of that unspent budget authority that you'll never get back. And there's going to be some decisions that'll have to be made with that. But it certainly can be done. It just, at this point, you know, I think we need to know, because we've been working on this for almost a year and a half. With, like I said, November of 2018, the board authorized the closing of Central. So if it's going to change, we need to know fairly quickly, because we've got a lot of people doing a lot of things. And like I said, I certainly understand the concerns of parents. I wish it could be completely different and everything would be taken care of. We're going to talk a little bit about what we can do to provide some space help. You know, we certainly could look at, you know, redistricting the elementary buildings could make a huge difference. That's a whole nother bucket of worms that you may or may not want to go down. But that's kind of where the budget thing is we have to do something different because you have no choice. The choice of keeping everything as it is isn't a choice. And we're always open to better ideas and thoughts and how we could do that. I just, as a person that will be leaving this spot, I just want to make sure that I've done my due diligence in letting you know that if you certainly can vary from the plan, but there's always consequences for those things. And just so you know going into it that there would have to be some give somewhere. So I don't know if that's probably a little more than you wanted to know about that, but I think it's important we just have to remember that. We are constrained by our budget.
Jerry, if I wasn't on the board and able to see this stuff like I do, is it possible to explain it quickly to our listening audience? What if we followed the same path, what's that mean? I mean, when you say, you know, oh, you're going to go through unspent budget, what does that mean? What does that look like? If we decided a year from now or 2 years, because you say we're trying to buy 10 years or 7 to 10 years, what if we say we're going to keep going the way it is, we're going to figure it out in 5 years?
You wouldn't be able to. And Tom, you correct me if I'm wrong.
What's that mean for those listening?
You would, if you kept everything as it is, in about 18 months, you're going to be out of money.
Which means what?
Which means the state steps in and says, you have to get your house in order, which means RIFs, cutting programs, get yourself in order. If that doesn't happen in 2 years, the state takes you over.
And then what?
Then the state takes you over. You know, that one of the first month I was on the job here, I got a letter from the Department of Ed saying, we're looking at your district's spending trajectory, and if something doesn't change, you're going to be in the red. That's not a great letter to get in August of your first year on the job. But that's where we were headed, and we had to make some changes and do some things. Tom has done a great job of allowing us to have some cushion. That's why I say you have some things you can do, you have some cushion, but the cushion's not going to last forever. And when it's gone, it's gone. It's going to be really hard to recoup the unspent budget authority with a declining enrollment. I don't know how you'd do it. Tom would have to lie, I guess. I don't know. It gets really difficult. So, you know, I really understand. I really do understand how difficult this is for folks. But I also know that our kids in the 5th or 6th grade get band and orchestra. They get access to a counselor. They get access to therapists if they need it. They get access to specials that they wouldn't have had 2 or 3 years ago. You know, I feel really good at what this district is doing to give more to kids. The fact that we're one of the few districts anywhere that has pre-AP for 5th and 6th graders. We were able to do those things, but we wouldn't have been able to do them if we still had Washington open, if we were still operating Colorado as an elementary school. There's trade-offs. So I think we have Stephanie.
Kind of in the spirit of what Jerry was talking about is that Stephanie's going to talk a little bit about, we want parents to feel like they've been listened to, that they've been heard. And one of the things we've looked at Madison is a space issue, and we think it's a legitimate space issue in some respects. And so later on in the board agenda, you'll be getting a proposal to an action item to move on a portable for Madison. And Stephanie's going to talk a little bit about how that's going to be used and answer any questions you might have.
Stephanie, before we transition, I would just like to say thank you to Chris, Mike, Denise, Liz, Corey, all of you that have put this information together. Change is hard. And we've asked our district to make a lot of changes. And we've asked our staff to make a lot of changes. We didn't have answers to what it would look like. And we asked you, will you figure it out? And this plan, and I too forget, it feels like we've talked about this for a lot longer than a year and a half. It feels more like 3 or 4 years. I forget how much anxiety probably gets built up from a staff perspective. How will we pull it together? What will it look like? And my guess is we might have a few bumps along the way. But I do appreciate your willingness to take, even thinking about kids maybe not losing identity, which, by the way, it's just as hard for adults because there's a lot of us in this room who identify green and white or blue and yellow through the years. And so helping our kids make that transition is important. That was to hear you all talk about that, and Denise with such passion. I appreciate that. So thank you all for all of this information, for the good conversation. I'm sure this didn't just all happen magically in an afternoon either. So thank you for the work you've done. All right, Stephanie, sorry, thanks.
No. So I'm Stephanie Zillig. I serve as the principal at Madison Elementary. And my job tonight is to kind of describe to you some of the history as to why we made the decisions that we did, talk about communication, and then talk about the plan going forward with the additional supports. So first of all, we just want to thank the board for the supports that we were provided this year with our additional driveway, our additional parking, our additional resources. The transition for all of our teachers and staff members who were able to come and join our staff, we very much appreciate. And that's been one of the best parts of this transition, is not only the additional students, but the additional staff members and how that culture has developed within our building. So we really appreciate that. I did bring 2 of my wonderful BLT members, our building leadership team members, because the history behind some of the space moves stems from our building leadership team. Again, we started this transition over a year and a half ago, and how were we going to utilize our resources efficiently and with students first and foremost in all of our minds. Our building leadership team is where that originated. So we have a member from each grade level and our specials and our special education department, and they were able to come up with some ideas. And we went through at least 20 different iterations of a map of how we could best utilize our space. And as you heard from some of the parents tonight, we chose to utilize, for example, our library, which is a very large space, which works really well for our whole group band and orchestra. We chose to use that as a classroom. And the reason that we chose that space to use is it is an open space, it is a very flexible space, it allows the 6th grade students that are in there space to move around. And the way we were able to kind of mitigate the fact that we were using our library was to do mobile checkouts. So we have our media clerk providing mobile checkouts to our K1 and 2 students, so that we're not able to see a decline in the amount of books that are checked out. However, we do realize that that creates an inability to use that space for a break space. It also creates a lack of opportunity for us to use what we had created as a maker space. So one of the options that, should the board decide to approve the use of a portable, would be that we would be able to reclaim that library space for a library. That would allow our students to have that as a break space. It would be our teachers would be able to put small groups in that flexible space. We would be able to do some testing, just have a more flexible space. We have a lot of different outside agencies that come in to meet with students. We have Big Brothers, Big Sisters. We have outside therapy, so we would be able to use that space in that way. And we would be able to move the students that are in that library space into that portable classroom. So that would be one advantage. We would still continue to use that space for the band, orchestra, and choir whole group rehearsal space. That happens right off the bat in the morning, so that makes logical sense that they would still meet there to practice, to rehearse. We have a separate space for the band and orchestra lessons, so that wouldn't impact that space. The second area that I wanted to address would be concerns with we have a 2nd grade classroom that is currently residing in what was formerly our art space, which if you were a new board member, you saw that classroom on your tour. It is a large classroom, and as we were thinking about the transition, we had talked through, we could put up a wall in that space and create 2 classrooms. However, the building leadership team looked at that and said, based on projections of declining enrollment, we know that eventually we're going to take that wall back down. We also know that an advantage of a co-taught classroom is that you have additional adults in that space. And so what that looks like on a daily basis is that you have 6 adults in that classroom during their reading block for core and for an hour during math block. So the group sizes that you have in that classroom are about 6 to 1 for over 2 hours. That means the GT teacher is pushing in. That means the reading specialist is pushing in. We have a para in there all of the time. So we really have very small class sizes, small group sizes in that classroom. And when meeting with our building leadership team, one of the options that was discussed, and with the 2nd grade team, I asked, what are parent feedback? What are you getting from parents in this 2nd grade co-taught classroom? And those teachers had been proactive during New Muskie visits. They had met as a team with all of those parents. And they'd really talked through what is that going to look like on a daily basis. They had described how small groups were going to work in reading and in math, what the logistics of that space. There's some flexible seating going on. They have really utilized that space so that it is very warm and welcoming. And they haven't gotten negative parent feedback in that way. And as a matter of fact, we have parents that are coming to request that their student move into that co-taught classroom. We have one section that is taught by a single teacher and then the 2 sections that are co-taught. So that's been really interesting for us as we navigate this new system to see what that looks like. And so I appreciate those two teachers. When we discussed a portable, the first question that they came to me with is, "You're not going to make us move into that portable. You're not going to separate us, are you?" And we talked through as a building leadership team that we want to do what's best for kids. And right now, the system that they have working in that co-taught classroom is working really well. We have currently, speaking of goals, and I don't want to bore anyone with all of our data, but I'm going to pass this around because right now we know that our attendance is really great. We have the lowest chronic.
I was going to say, she has the best attendance in the district of any building, K-12.
So we have, our students are attending. We have met our 90% family involvement goal. So we are students, we're meeting. We've had 2 family nights. We just had a PTO meeting tonight. And of course, I would welcome any parent to attend those PTO meetings. And if you have specific questions, always please reach out. Just as Corey and Chris said, I have an open door policy too, so I would welcome that opportunity to meet with you. But so thinking about goals, from an office referral standpoint, our building goal is 135 office referrals at the end of the year. And if you know us, we really like to meet goals. We've met those goals every year, and right now we're at 70. So we're sitting right about where we should be for mid-year. And so I'm really pleased about the progress that we're making academically, social, emotionally, and I'm going to give a shout out to our counselor, and from attendance standpoint. So we know we're moving in the right direction in those ways. And so I really think I appreciate the board being willing to support us with this additional resource because like you asked earlier, what do you need in order to be successful? I appreciate this offer because I think this will help us. One, it'll open up that library space. Another parent concern that was brought up this morning or today was the art and music on a cart or art and music in a classroom, which is currently what we have. So this portable would have 2 classrooms. It would be able to provide a space for one of those teachers to be there. So your student would be transitioning to that space rather than having music in their classroom. And again, those are things that are helpful for us to work through that transition because we know that it's a short term. We know that eventually we're going to be able to turn some of those spaces back into classrooms and to have some of those spaces back. So we appreciate the offer of the portable if that's what the board chooses to do.
And just for a couple, what is your 6th grade and 5th grade enrollment this year?
So we have 76 6th graders, and we'll be moving all the way down to about 61. So
next year's 6th grade. The other thing with the portables that is for only it is temporary. We cannot have it for more than 2 years, and it is as the numbers will attest in the building that should take care of it. But that's what we're operating on is that it would be just a 2-year use of the portable.
So one of the questions might be, where is it going to be located? Supervision for that. It is going to be located right outside of our door F, which I don't have a map to show, but I would be more than happy to share that with you. And Mr. Miller, I'm sure, can speak to this more, but we will be having it outside that door. We won't be losing space in our parking lot for it. It's directly outside of our gym, so it makes for a very quick transition where our students would be moving in and out there very easily. We have camera availability so we can make sure that our students are safe while they're there.
I think maybe for the audience too, just so our TV audience knows this, is that the portable is actually 2 classrooms, so it provides 2 classroom space.
1 building, 2 rooms.
Yeah.
How far is the walk? You talk about where this from door F. What's that look like?
Like a sidewalk, a concrete pad. So currently right now we have a shed that stores salt and things like that, and that shed would be moved. So that's where it'll be.
So are we talking to walk from building to portable 10 feet, 25 feet-ish?
Yeah, 10 feet.
Okay.
It'll be scooped. It's a sidewalk, so it's very flat, very safe.
While you're digesting that too, I think it's come up in the past too, Stephanie, if you want to just speak to our lunchroom concerns, things like that. What is your perspective? And
Sure. So all of our students have 25 minutes for lunch. Thinking about the schedule of lunch, we have our kinders and first grade eating. Earlier we had a concern about fourth graders eating lunch in their classrooms. And the fourth graders eating lunch in their classrooms has nothing to do with space in our gym to eat. We have a huge gym, we have a beautiful gym. It has everything to do with at the end of the day at Madison, we have created a structure called a walk-to intervention. And during that time, all of our students have intervention that meets their needs at that time. So that's extension, that's enrichment, and it's K through 4. So in order for those fourth grade students to also participate in that walk-to intervention model, they eat lunch at the same time as another grade level so that they're able to participate in that. So we are able to meet the needs of our kiddos going through. They all have 25-minute lunches. Some go to recess before lunch and some go to recess after. We were provided with a brand new sidewalk that goes from our lunchroom right out to our playground, so we very much appreciate that. That makes the transition much easier. And then we do have 2 clubs that go on during our lunchtime. So some of our students don't eat in the lunchroom. We have a club, a Harry Potter club, and then we also have a Pokemon club. And those are student driven. So that helps to kind of ease the flow of the amount of students in our lunchroom at one time.
Does your 25 minutes for lunch, does that include the recess time, or that's just 25 minutes dedicated just to eating?
Correct, 25 minutes for eating. They have a 15-minute recess. That's a good question.
one other thing, like Jerry mentioned on the chronic absenteeism, what's truly amazing too about Madison is that they've eliminated almost all their tier 3 students, our most difficult kids to get, and that's amazing to be able to do as a school. And it's also been one of our schools that has been one of our highest performing, had most growth academically, and no pressure, Stephanie, but I'm sure that will happen again this year.
Well, I did attach our ISAS scores, so you can check that out.
What do we credit with that improvement?
One of the pieces that we built, and I just described that walk-to intervention model, is every student getting exactly what they need for a 40-minute chunk. So we're using some diagnostic testing to see our students that are ready to move to advanced, how can we move them to the advanced category? Students who are right at where they need to be, how can we enrich? And then students that we need to remediate, how do we support them? And the benefit of that walk-to is if I'm a kinder and I'm reading chapter books, I'm moving to an intervention that's appropriate for me. But if I'm a second grader, I'm not quite reading yet, then I can move to a teacher who's going to support me. And I also credit that to the additional support resources. You know, we went from 1 instructional coach to 2 instructional coaches, 1 reading support teacher to 2. So we've definitely benefited from that additional support.
Working with Madison very closely academically, I also attribute it to clearly Stephanie's leadership. We have incredible teachers at Madison, and they're constantly evolving. You're constantly wanting to implement change, whatever is necessary to improve the scores. And it's been really unbelievable the last few years, the growth at Madison academically.
So the end of the day is primarily targeted to reading, language arts.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the math side of it, or it's just whatever you need at the language arts or reading side of it.
So we've actually done, the walk-to can encompass math also. So we do a PLC, a professional learning community process, a 3-week cycle. And so depending on what the data suggests, we may do a cycle on math too. It just depends. Our math, if you look at our scores as I pass them around, you'll see our math scores are 10 to 12 percentage points higher than reading. So we know we need to target the literacy area more than we do the math. And I would target that math growth to our partnership with our AEA. We have a really strong partnership there.
just glancing at that really quickly, the science seemed to be a lower area. How much time roughly does any one student spend? And I'm guessing it's less at the primary age as opposed to an upper level.
Right, so we're working within a new science curriculum, and so we've definitely recognized that we need to add that. We had a couple years where we didn't have science as a focus as a district, and so we're seeing that now. That's at the 4th, 5th, 6th grade level, so we know that we need to put more time there. The benefit that we've seen is that we do have rich experiences through this new curriculum for our students in 6th grade. So there's depending on the grade level, there is a different amount of time spent, but they are required to do 30 minutes, and so they do 30 minutes at the even kindergarten level in science.
Daily.
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie, I just need to say that I remember going to the STEM night that you had there, and because I live near Madison, so it's kind of part of me, I guess, still. But anyway, I was helping out with these little, like, almost Lego things. I'm not sure what they call them now, but it kind of like that. And this kid made just kind of a straight thing like that. He was a kindergartner, and he showed it to me. He goes, "Look, I made a platform." Who, as a kindergartner, uses the word platform? It was amazing to me to see how those kids were going all around in all the different areas that and they were having a ball with it. So thank you for what you do with that too.
Thank you for volunteering. We appreciate that.
So Stephanie, are you saying that there's a correlation between kids being met where they are and I would say, is it confidence? Is it the reason? Because you're talking about chronic absenteeism for them wanting to be there. What's that? Because when Aaron asks, what's that? Do you have this where you're meeting them, but why is that still driving them to want to be there?
So, and I could let KJ or Karen talk through, a lot of that is their classroom culture. Their overall wanting to be there because their classroom teacher believes in them, their classroom teacher responds to them with what they need. They have strong friendships. And there are, they're excited about, our 5th and 6th graders are excited about the opportunities that they have for Essentials. They love Project Lead the Way. When I talk to parents, that's one of my first questions to them is, which Essential is your child's favorite? Because I want to know, is it art, is it music, is it orchestra, is it band, is it choir? And I want that feedback. And so I know that's part of why we have an increase in attendance is because they want to be there for their classroom, they want to be there for their friends, and they want to be there for the things that they're exposed to.
Stephanie, first of all, I would like to thank you for everything that you are doing for your building and your school. And I mean, my kids, part of the reason why, I don't want to say that's the only reason why they like schools. That would be very bad to say that. But that Essentials makes a huge difference on those kids. They feel they belong, they feel that they are doing something different, and they are working and liking the students that they are part of their classrooms more because they're interacting with each other in a non-academic way, also this way. I have just a quick question for the portable. Do you know which classrooms do you want to use them for, please?
Sure. So we have currently a 6th grade classroom that is in that library. And so that would make logical sense. We do have our building leadership team, and we will sit down together and we will decide what that looks like. We have had conversations with all of our staff members as to what does that make, what are their suggestions, give their feedback, and so we've been able to look through that, and then our building leadership team will make the decision.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think one question the board may have too is our other elementary that has some, I think, real space constraints is Grant. And we had the same conversation with Grant to see their interest level and maybe moving forward with the portable this year as well. They looked at it for many similar reasons that Stephanie articulated about what's working at Grant. They didn't want to change things up right now. The 6th grade class, where you have 3 teachers in 2 classrooms, they preferred to stay together. What makes it a little bit different at Grant is they don't use the library for a classroom like Madison. So right now, their preference was to kind of monitor it the remainder of this year and then see if this is something they want for next year or not. Like Jerry, I guess, said too, is the numbers at Grant go down starting next year as well. They'll need less sections too, so that's going to make a difference as well.
Stephanie, at the end of the day, when all these pieces that we talked about, what keeps you awake at night? What are the pieces that you are concerned about? What do you receive feedback on that you think I have to figure out the answer to X, Y, Z, whatever that may be?
That's a really interesting question. So keeping me up at night, I am very goal oriented. So we always want to make sure that we're meeting the kids where they're at, or we're meeting all of their academic needs. And so that's really where we are now. From a procedures and processes standpoint, we've gone through the growing pains of dismissal and drop off. We've gone through the lunchroom, all of those kind of pieces. So we have those in order now. We recently, again, with support, have an administrative intern, Mr. Zabriansky. So he's joined our team, and that's been really helpful to kind of ease him into that role too as a support. So from keeping me up at night, it's always that constant, how can we better, how can we improve what we're doing? How can we improve what we're offering to students? How can we improve our communication to parents? How can we retain teachers? So those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about.
A good example of that, when they reached the level of being the lowest chronic absenteeism, Stephanie's first comment was, well, we haven't met our goal yet. And that's, I love that. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yep.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Stephanie. Thank you. Good information. I think that takes us through all of our board targets. Jerry, do you have
Yes.
anything else? All right.
No.
I know it's a long night. It's good conversation for the board, and I appreciate everybody hanging in. We now move on to the action items on our agenda. Action item A, the following items are considered to be routine by the Board of Education and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless the director so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence from the agenda. Those items are minutes, bills and claims, employment recommendations, special education contracts. What are the wishes of the board?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed? And the motion carries. That just took care of a whole bunch of things. All right, so the next item on our agenda is to approve the conflict of interest exhibit. And I believe every board member received a copy of that. It was policy 203.9. We have seen this a couple of times now. Tom, I'm gonna, if I can, this was.
So this is a recommendation from our auditors to add to our current board policy 203.9. So this is just an exhibit that can be, we can have action on tonight. And then if you, most of you have read it, but it'll be a four-page just conflict of interest survey, just notifying the school on answering all the questions that are on there. And that'll be one per year. Lisa will get that out, and then if anything changes throughout the year, then you would notify the superintendent or the board secretary or myself.
Okay.
So.
And while new to the district, not new to a lot of other boards where this is signed yearly.
Right.
And I know I think a couple of us had some different questions that we've run through Jerry as far as things that we need to either call out or don't need to call out. So if anybody has any specific questions.
Just reach out to any one of us.
I would entertain a motion to approve that.
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the policy 203.9 conflict of interest. Is there any discussion? John, did you have a question? I didn't mean to stop you.
No, as a matter of fact, I was planning to say, I serve on several boards, and some of them is national or international, and we go through this yearly too. I mean, we have to sign that kind of document, so that's a great document that we need to be aware of and sign as board members. Yeah.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And the motion carries. If you have not signed that before you leave tonight and you would sign it and get it to Lisa, that would be great. Or if you pass it to me and I'll get it to Lisa. Item G is our next item. This is the request to approve the administrative authority to seek modified supplemental amount from the SBRC or the School Budget Review Committee for open enrollment out, not in fall 2018, in the amount of $339,494 and ELL served beyond 5 years of $184,659. Tom, this has your name written all over it.
So this is an annual request, and in the board book, I put in just a summary of the 3 areas that we're talking about here. And this is a strictly general fund because we're talking about spending authority. And 3 ways in which we can ask for additional authority are increase in enrollment, which that is not applicable to us this year. The second way is open enrollment out. And the reason on our count that just happened October 1st, we had roughly 50 new students on our count this year that were not on last year's count. And with open enrollment, we're required to send that tuition money to those districts based on who is coming to school here this year. So technically, we did not generate authority for those 50 students because we are getting authority this year for students that we had on our count in October of 2018. So these 50 students could be just, I don't know the reason that they weren't counted. Maybe they moved into our district and continued their education or whatnot. It could be various reasons. So we want to ask for that authority because we are going to be sending that money to those districts. The third area is English language learners served beyond 5 years. So included in our current year authority are students that are in ELL from 1 to 5 years. But we can ask for additional authority for students that we are serving beyond 5 years. And we get an additional 0.22, and that is 122 students. So that'll generate another $184,000. And so we will want to ask for that authority because we know we're going to be spending that on ELL this year. So those are the 3 areas. In the second part of my financial report, we'll kind of go over where those actually fit into our current year spending authority. So we're just asking for approval to get this approved and the board minutes sent off to the Department of Ed.
And this is an annual request?
Annual
this is one of those
request.
things we do every year. We don't
Correct.
really this is really not optional, ultimately.
Technically it would be, I guess, but I would not, that's not the recommendation.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item G as listed with the dollar amounts for the SBRC open enrollment out, as well as the ELL served beyond 5 years. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed? And the motion carries.
Thank you.
Item H is to request authority to enter into a lease with Mountain Home Company for a portable classroom at Madison Elementary in the amount not to exceed a one-time cost of $25,000 with a monthly lease not to exceed $900 per month for no longer than 24 months.
And we've had some of that conversation already about that. This does provide some of that short-term relief for Madison. And we may want to look at grant next year. There are some programs that may or may not be at grant next year that may affect if they would need the space or not. So, but this would take care of, this would be able, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but they should be able to have this up and going second semester at the portable. We do still have to get city approval and some of those things, but.
I don't want to put the cart before the horse. Mike and I have a site review committee meeting a week from Wednesday, and that will determine where we go with this, how fast the city will let us go on it. I have been in extensive conversations with them. We've been down this road before with them because we looked at it at McKinley a few years ago, knowing we were going to add on. So how fast we can get it is going to determine how fast the city lets us. I have been in contact with the parent company. The units are sitting out in, where is that? Winterset, Iowa. So plan on venturing out there later this week with Ryan and possibly Dr. Reeby if it fits into his schedule. Take a look at these classrooms. I don't want to, at this time, put a timeline on it, but we know that this is when we want to try and get them. So it's going to dictate, how fast we can move through with the city and stuff.
Well, Jeff, just quick question, and as Jerry, you said, we had a lot of discussion about that already. How many students can we fit in the?
Okay, so that's a great question. These things are 24 by 68. So you're going to have roughly somewhere around an 860 square foot classroom, which is more than average for what a lot of our classrooms are. So there are 2 there, which will help Stephanie alleviate some of her space issues.
Well, I would like to move to approve buying the 2.
Leasing.
I'm sorry.
Lease. You gave me a heart attack.
I need to correct that.
Tom, too, probably.
Lease. The 2 Mountain Home Company for, the portable classroom for Madison and for up to 24 months.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there any other discussion? Stephanie, not to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot. This is useful for you and for your building. Okay.
And I heard Jeff commit to the the second semester. No,
I thought they
Jeff, everybody tonight has been really humble. Jeff has said, without a doubt, he'll make that happen.
I heard that.
And that's what I heard.
Did he say he was picking it up tomorrow?
I will tell you this. I have been in Stephanie's building. I know it's a need. I will move as hard and fast as I can. I can't go. I needed this to happen tonight before we can have an end game. So now, tomorrow, Rob from the parent company knows I will be in contact with him tomorrow. We will now start moving forward to see how quickly we can get this unit moved in.
I will say, and I want to thank Jeff, is when we start talking about this option, he's moved incredibly quick, and for us to be in this position.
Yeah, I agree.
It's nice to see you so serious too. That's good to see.
Yeah.
It's a new board.
Yeah, you got to be serious. Yeah.
Is just for perspective's sake, what's the size of a trailer, a mobile home trailer? Is it about the same size? Is it not quite as long? I'm trying to make the 24 by 68 relevant in my own mind.
It'd be roughly the size of a double wide would be my guess. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it is good size. Okay.
Good size.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I will tell you this, we're lucky to get our hands on these because regardless of what people hear, they do use these, and they're very popular, especially in the smaller communities and stuff for temporary purposes. So.
Okay. All those in favor of moving ahead with the lease with Mountain Home Company for the portable classroom for Madison, the one-time cost of $25,000, not to exceed $900 per month rental fee, if you will, and no longer than 24 months. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And the motion carries. Madison will have a new portable. next week. Jeff said he was going to go pick it up.
Yeah.
That takes us to our discussion and information portion of our meeting, and we are to our October 2019 financials.
Okay. I can skip through this or skim through this pretty quickly and get to the last page, but on the October financials, I don't have any comment other than the one thing that I always look at is where we are at after October, percent of our revenue received and percent of our expenditures expended, and we compare that to the prior year, and in all of our funds we're pretty much on target where we are, so don't really have any huge concerns. Nothing unusual has happened, so I will skip to the last page, which is this colorful one that it talks about general fund spending authority. And this is kind of the first look at FY20 for you guys. Just a reminder, everything in blue, we really don't have any control over. It's all formula generated. It's based on enrollment and what we get per student. The things in yellow, those are things like line 16, or the line after number 16, I don't know why there's a blank there, but call it 16A and 17. Those are the authority that we just approved tonight. So I have that built into our formula. If you move on down, the next yellow line, you'll see line 29, which is our miscellaneous income. That's kind of an estimate right now, but I think the unspent authorized budget from last year included in this year's is $11.2 million. I'm going to skip all the way down to the last line, which is that number we want to look at to make sure our authority that we're generating this year is $56.8 million, and that's based on some estimates still on LEP allowable costs, potentially special ed. If we would happen to have a deficit, we'll ask for authority on that. So we're right around 56.8 for the authority we're going to generate this year. Right now, our estimated expenditures are around 57.5, so we're looking at, that's less than 1.5% of our total budget. So I'm not super concerned. There's no trend that I'm seeing that we're going to be continuing to reduce our unspent authorized budget. So I think we're in decent shape almost halfway through fiscal 20. So,
but I'm just going to throw in though that's the perfect example of how thin it is, because we're going to have about $600,000 less in state aid next year. So it is the diligence on the budget is going to be something that's going to be really important for the board over the next few years. And thank goodness you have Tom. He does a great job with that, keeps his eyes on those things, but we don't have a lot of room for leeway.
So I have no other comments unless you have any questions.
Any questions for Tom?
Tom, the fiscal year 20, the far right column, that's next year, correct?
No, we're in fiscal 20 right now.
This is the current year. So both are last year's estimated and this year's estimated?
Yeah, I leave that estimated because I wait until the state of Iowa says it's final, and they're not going to say it's final yet until
2021.
Yeah, probably, for sure, yeah. So okay. It's pretty final in my opinion. So.
Any other questions for Tom? I will read through some announcements that we have and of upcoming events. So tomorrow, December 10th, the Riverbend Food Bank, the mobile pantry, will be at the Administration Center, 2900 Mulberry, from 4:30 to 6. And Lisa, I'm going to look at you. If you are a family in need, you may show up at the center.
Actually, any Muscatine School District family can come. There's no income restrictions.
Okay. And I don't need to bring anything with me other than I just need to come.
They need to come, and I believe they do check in, so they need to make certain they have a student within our district.
Okay.
And that's it.
Okay.
And just last month, we set a record, which is not a good record to set, but we served 182 families.
Wow.
In 2.5 hours. And I also want to shout out, Mike has been just a true champion for this, and it's a great help for our families. And if any of you have the opportunity to come volunteer, it is the perfect thing as we move into this holiday season.
And I think you were seeking some board help, and I know some people were able to sign up, some are not, but I'm sure there will be lots of opportunities going forward if tomorrow didn't work.
It's once a month.
Okay.
On the second Tuesday of the month.
Okay. I think if you would keep that in front of the board, just so that would be great, so we could see that. Then we have Wednesday, December 11th, we have a 2-hour early dismissal. December 16th, the board has a busy 8 weeks ahead of them. We have a special board session. We'll be meeting at 5:30 at the Administration Center. That is a closed session. We will be doing our first review for superintendent applications and be making a selection for semifinalists. That is a closed session because those individuals have not necessarily shared with their current district or their employer that they are actively interested in our position. So to keep that important confidentiality, we keep that as a closed session. There is no action taken, but the board will be meeting to be able to discuss candidates. December 20th is a 2-hour early dismissal, and then we kick off winter break, which starts December 23rd through January 3rd. That takes us into 2020 already, which will be then January 6th will be the first day of second semester. Looking ahead on January 8th, we have a 2-hour early dismissal. January 11th, which is Saturday, if I remember correctly, the board will be meeting again in closed session. That will be an all-day session, 8:30 to 5:30, and we will start a first round of interviews with those semifinalist candidates. January 13th will be our next board meeting, and then our next step as a board after we review semifinalist candidates will then be once there are finalist candidates, those names will be released to the public. So at that point in time, when those individuals have had an opportunity to share with their employer, that information will be shared as we make that final decision. It is a late night, and some of us started really early today. I want to thank everybody for good conversation, for reviewing data. Again, a huge shout out to all of our staff for all the time and effort that you have put together in a variety of things. We had some great community input tonight. We've had it at past meetings. I would ask parents to continue the conversation. I would ask them to continue to start that conversation in your buildings. Your building leadership teams can help you so much with questions that you have and get information. If you need one of us to help guide you to who that person is, we can do that. But if you start those conversations with them, the conversation we can then have becomes much richer once we've involved all the right people. So thank you for everybody's work tonight. Unless anyone has anything else for the good of the cause, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Well, before that, if I may mention that, I would like to invite everybody to Sister City Business After Hours this coming Thursday, and it will be at the Arts Center from 5 to 7.
And that is December
12th,
okay, at the Art Center.
Yes.
Thank you, John. Okay. Anybody have anything else?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
And I'm assuming no one is opposed. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.